exploration, and much more. Globally positioning Dominica within the Caribbean. Join the conversation on the Global View on Q. Tune in, call us, have your say. The Global View on Q, only on Q95, the big station.
So hello, everybody. Good evening and a very, very warm welcome to you in Radioland at home and abroad. This is the Global View on Q. I'm your host, Sheridan Gregoire, Mr. G. It's Tuesday, 25th November, and it's the 43rd Tuesday of 2022. And just about, 8:01 p.m. at Q95, the big station. We are live on Facebook and YouTube, and please follow us at Q95 FM Radio. Our website is www.q95da.com. Share the live, like our pages, get the latest breaking news and reviews as it happens, when it happens, only on Q95. My distinguished guest tonight, Dr. Peter Saint-Jean, who will be joining us in a little bit later. Dr. Gregoire Siragusa is here with us. We'll tell you a little bit more about him later. Mr. Anthony Drigo, Mr. Jeff Bellot, and Mr. Hurtault. They really need no introduction. They're all household names in Dominica and abroad. But when I do go to Dr. Siragusa to make his opening contribution, I will let him tell you something about himself and his background, his qualifications and experience. And that will help you to contextualize his suggestions and whatever contributions he makes there tonight. So we're continuing to move forward, moving towards reviving the spirit of graciousness, of love, of peace, prosperity, and unity among our Kalinago and Afro-Caribbean people. Our topic tonight, making a fresh start, building a modern society and economy in Dominica. Embracing this 44th anniversary of our independence as a teaching juncture in our democracy, as an ideal opportunity to reflect on a good gauge for unifying our homeland and measuring what constitutes good social and cultural progress, good democratic governance, and good economics. Tonight, we will explore what Dominica can truly become with good democratic governance and sound management of its natural and human resources, with work, wages, and wealth for every Dominican at the core of proper people-centered planning. So meantime, here are a few areas which I hope my illustrious guests, Dr. Peter Saint-Jean, Dr. Greg Siragusa, engineer, Mr. Anthony Drigo, Mr. Jeff Bellot, and a computer science expert, Mr. Hurtault, will help us unravel some of the answers and find solutions for a positive economic way forward for Dominica. We will discuss some concrete ideas, rather, for the knowledge industries, for example, for peaceology, which Dr. Peter Saint-Jean will tell us all about, agriculture and agribusiness. Certainly, I know that the government of Dominica is moving now to decriminalize cannabis, so we will look at cannabis-driven medicinal industries. We certainly look at bulk and bottled water and fruit and beverage industries, milk, poultry and animal feeds, herbs, spices, teas, all of those types of industries, personal care products and more, all coming from the natural resources, all from these natural resources. Plus production, of course, of basic necessities and food security. I mean, footwear, clothing, and knowledge industry products, plus, all for export. Really making a fresh start. We have done several of these things on a small scale in the past in Dominica. Our young entrepreneurs are now doing some of them on a small cottage industry scale, but we can produce more for a global niche market. We will discuss tonight the good, the bad, the ugly, the dangerous, with no anger, no malice, no personal attacks, no vilification, no divisiveness, just simply bringing back civility, a caring society, and a progressive governance, recognizing the imperative for the true resilience and sustainability for our Kalinago and Afro-Caribbean brothers and sisters. Tonight, your voices at home and abroad always take priority. They will tonight. Call in, tell us what you think about making a fresh start, building this modern society, and economy in Dominica, and by extension, embracing this 44th anniversary of independence as a real good teaching juncture for us. So we take this opportunity to examine the standard of living and the quality of life of ordinary men, women, children, and the elderly in Dominica, and to look to eliminate any and all poverty, abuse, and mendicancy that exists in the country. I mean, this is what we do if we make a fresh start. People at the center, well-being for everybody. So stay tuned with us tonight in this space for another great debate. Certainly get the answers to your questions and be part of the solution wherever you are in Dominica, in the region, and globally. Join this conversation on the Global View on Q. Have your say as you do every Tuesday with me, Mr. G, only on Q95, the big station. But as usual, let me say a huge shout out, hugs, much love, appreciation, and a big thank you to our healthcare providers and frontline workers doing their very best and often working under difficult conditions. So please follow the correct advice, guidelines, and protocols and be safe. Happy you could be with us tonight. We welcome you warmly and embrace you wherever you are, in every nook and cranny, in every village, every community in Dominica, in the region, and globally. Thank you, Sherwin, keeping us on the air in crystal clear liquid stereo. Thank you, DJ Shan, on the console at Q95, looking very young and sprightly tonight. We remember the indefatigable Lambert Charles and extend well wishes to him for a speedy recovery from his illness and a full recovery. The people's voice is priority tonight, as we see, and we will take your calls. Let's get started. I want to go first to Mr. Bernardito. And the reason I'm doing this, not necessarily because he's the handsomest or youngest or most energetic guy who had all of this Creole thing.
None of this.
You have all this Creole thing under your belt. I mean, we don't have that. So, and he hope Bernard will give us a sort of a situation analysis as to what he sees taking place in Dominica and where we should be going from here in the context of our topic tonight, which I want to remind you is making a fresh start, building a modern society and economy in Dominica, embracing this 44th anniversary of our independence as a teaching juncture in our democracy, as an ideal opportunity to reflect on a good gauge for unifying our homeland and measuring what constitutes good social and cultural progress, good democratic governance, and good economics. So you get the first word. Bernardito, over to you.
All right, Gary, very well, Mr. G. Good evening to you and, of course, my esteemed colleagues on the panel. And good evening to all the listeners. We're always happy to join you and have this conversation. I know you guys listen because you meet me all the time on the road and you talk about the programs and we have dialogue about it. So I know you guys are listening tonight and, out there in Radio Land, and we're happy to engage you in the dialogue. It's through dialogue that we can imagine new possibilities and, implement them. So it's a really good thing so that we have these conversations. Well, I think you framed it very well, Mr. G. I mean, it is all about, reimagine our communities, reimagining our nation, reimagining what we can be, what we should be, what we could be. A nation exists primarily in the mind. There is a physical reality to it, but that physical reality is a reflection of what we think of ourselves, what we conceptualize of ourselves, how innovatively and imaginatively we have been through the years. So really, a nation is an imagined community. And it starts there. And the question is, what have we been imagining for the past 44 years, and what should we imagine for the next 44? Because truly, it is the conceptualization of ourselves, our innovation, our ideas that get implemented and realized and lead to good life outcomes for ourselves and for those that we care about. And so it's a very germane topic, and it's a very relevant conversation, and it is what we should be talking about. Because what we think about ourselves is what we become. The blueprints that we imagine, first in our mind, as a house does, first a blueprint, then they build that blueprint. But with a faulty blueprint, or no blueprint, or a substandard blueprint, you will have a substandard product. The blueprint is key. And that is what I think we're talking about here this evening, is what sort of blueprint do we need to imagine for our community, for our nation, for the land that we love. That is the key question that we discussed tonight. And I say it is high time that we have this conversation about a reimagination, about a reawakening, about a renaissance of what we should be, what we could be. It is necessary. It is driven by the fact that we have lost our way, clearly in my mind, in who we are as a people. We're not sure anymore. There is no one unified vision of who we are, and certainly, in my mind, no unified vision of who we want to be. And that is the task ahead of us, for all of us good citizens who is trying to lead and trying to offer ourselves in service in one way or the other, up and down the stack, from political leadership to business leadership to social leadership to community leadership. We're all trying to do that thing, which is imagine a new reality and then use our skills to execute, to make real, in practice, that vision. And that is what it's all about. And on this 44th anniversary of ours, it is a necessary conversation. So what should that new vision be? I think we have to look back at the history of Dominica. We have constantly been on the tail end of things, quite frankly. Our nation has always been catching up. Why? Well, frankly, we started 200 years later than everyone else. Most of the colonized islands started in the 1600s. It was some of them in the 1500s, the Spanish islands. But until 1763, Dominica had not yet begun its journey. So we are literally at least 150 years behind the process of development of all the other islands. So we have a lot of catching up to do, and that was because Dominica has always been a rebellious island, right? We were the last stand, the last bastion of the Kalinago people. And in fact, they managed to wrangle a deal from the Europeans to remain independent, to remain neutral, and to remain Dominica was to remain their heritage. But alas, as always, the Europeans did not keep their commitment and eventually overran the island and went down a different path of colony. But again, that process meant that Dominica was 150 years minimum, maybe more, it depends on how you slice it, of beginning our development journey. But that also engendered a certain rebelliousness, a certain self-sufficiency, a certain self-determination, and a certain sense of self that is fiercely defended by Dominicans. And that is something that we can grab onto to help us imagine our journey. But in any event, the journey that we have been upon as Dominicans is we've always tried to follow the traditional model that has been presented in the Caribbean context for development. We have followed the monoculture examples of sugarcane. Then we moved to the monoculture crops of lime. Then we moved into the monocrops of bananas. And we have followed for at least 2 centuries or more the model of trying to develop an agricultural economy based on monocrop agriculture. And I will argue beyond monocrop bananas, we then move into monocrop tourism, because tourism is frankly a crop as any other. It is a monocrop. It is dependent on the weather as crops do. It is dependent on the vagaries of the markets, on the whims and fancies of those who wish to visit, just as buying our bananas was dependent on the whims and fancies of the European market. And it is a one crop. It is not diversified in its sense, and it depends on extracting value from those who create value, and then we extract some of that value through selling them primary products, including tourism. And I would argue that it is high time that we move beyond that monocrop model, beyond that plantation model in its various guises, including, I would argue, as I've said, tourism, move beyond the plantation idea and reimagine who we should be, who we can be. Because we are an intelligent people, we are a capable people, we are people who have shown that we amass human capital well. And when we plug that human capital into other contexts, overseas contexts, Dominicans excel. In fact, we excel more than most, which is a very peculiar thing. But I think that comes from our desire to prove that we are as competent, capable as anyone else. And we have proven that our human capital has that potential and has that brilliance to do so. The question is, why are we so successful, fantastically successful overseas, but our country is frankly mediocre in its outcomes? And so that is the sort of questions we have to ask ourselves to reimagine what are the possibilities. And I say, the thing we have to reimagine, we have to lift our eyes up and say, we are smart, competent, capable, imaginative, creative people who are going to create an economy that is world class. We are no longer going to be comfortable with creating an economy that depends on the largesse of others. We're no longer going to create an economy that is a primary agricultural economy, that we have moved in this 2023 beyond that, and we have the vision to move up the value scale and to envision and realize a different reality for our economic progress. We are a proud people. We're an intelligent people. We need to be an imaginative, self-believing people that believe that we can transform our economies into those sort of industries. And that's where we must move. I say often, and you've heard me say this, Mr. G, we missed an opportunity to do so right around 2000 when the ICT industry was picking up and that curve, that wave was cresting, and we should have jumped on that, and we should have transformed our economy at that time into an ICT-based economy. But we missed that because, frankly, the political leadership at the time, maybe even the social leadership and social understanding, was not ready or capable of leading us in that direction. 23 years later, we are at the next pivotal point. There's another wave building and about to crest of the fourth industrial revolution, which is a revolution based in ICT, utilizes ICT, but uses communication technology as a tool, but not the primary driver of value. Now, the primary driver of value is data understanding, analysis of data to reveal new patterns where we can use those patterns and human understanding to create new human experiences, to create new human efficiencies, to create new, more efficient ways of using the world's resources by understanding knowledge and data. And that is what we are moving into, and I think we need to move into as a reimagined community.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you to stick a pin here because I know this is one of the areas that I want you to go in depth in later on, the knowledge industries and all the products that can come out of there and all the creation and the wealth that can be generated and the jobs from that. So I really want you to deal with that a little later on. But I want to go over to Jeff because you started talking about the evolution that we need to see, the changes that we found, the monocrop. And I'm pretty sure that Jeff has many ideas that he will share with us tonight. And I know that later on when we go to Dr. Greg Siragusa, he's going to give us the research background that we really need to be able to build on those industries. So Jeff, I want to go over to you, and in your opening remarks, let's talk a little bit about some of the diverse areas that you think that we could look at now that we're 44 years old. And we want to move away from this monocrop thing. Everything is only one thing, like we have tunnel vision. We need to think outside of the box and look at the bigger picture. So let's talk a bit some of your ideas on other areas where we can capitalize based on our human and natural resources.
Well, thank you, Mr. G. Good evening to you. Good evening to the panelists and listeners globally to the global view. For those who are wondering a little bit about me, background, I'm Jeff Bellot, known Stevenson Bellot in the US. I'm Dominican, originally from the Soufriere Scottsdale Gallia area. You work very well if youth development in Dominica and migrate to the US based out in Wisconsin, and where we have a business, we do our research and development side, and then we also have another area where we do manufacturing as well into the ag industry and also for human consumption. I think that the topic tonight, how do we move away from the old ways of doing things and how do we embrace new technology and the future for Dominica is very relevant topic with this time of age that we are living. I believe that Dominica in a crossroad right now, that we have to put the myths, old time thinking away of people like our great grandparents would tell us, don't eat pineapple at 9 o'clock at night because it will give you a bellyache and all these things, a myth. We need to move away from those myths and let's face reality that some of these things were not true. And what can we do at that crossroad to really get ourselves on track? And what are the services, organizations like ours can do to help that industry, particularly food security, food safety? I think right now we really need to sit down as a nation and get the best group of people possible globally to bring to the table. Let's look at the resources we have in Dominica. How do we use these resources to the best ability to provide not just food security, but also to provide jobs, grow the economy, and using the latest technology alive around right now to grow those industries, which can eventually grow your economy. Let's look at our young people. I mean, if you want to tell young people to go farming, and at the mind of a lot of people, farming is hard work. We have to go and dig how many holes to plant bananas and all of that. That's one side. But I think we need to look at other areas apart from dashing and feed. We need to look at the beyond bananas. We need to look at beyond just having a few chickens or pigs in the backyard and we feed the banana peels. These industries are areas where you can grow seriously. And because we don't want to be like even countries like the United States, where they have to import a lot of the labors into the ag industry. And Dr. Siragusa can tell you about that. That's one of the problems even companies like mine are facing right now to get good people to work. And in Dominica, as Mr. Ito said, we have talented people, we have hardworking people. Why don't we get the young people this training program we need to get them to understand that there's more to agriculture by just being a hot summer with a hat on your head, but you can actually do very well for yourself to be independent and eventually hire people to work for you. And a little later today, we'll go into using some of the technologies alive, the days of using antibiotics. Why Dominica cannot be the first island in the Caribbean to be 100% antibiotic free from foods, or at least start the process to decrease that. Just recently, the Minister for Trade said that I think it was market the difference or whatever they had recently. He said that we import over 80% of the food consumed in Dominica. That's alarming. According to him, that's almost $200 million. This is serious, guys. We can decrease this easily by 50%. And as we dive in tonight, we'll go step by step in the different industry like poultry. We can look at goat. We can look at pork, the ruminants, small ruminants we have, native animals to the island. How do we grow this? How do we create this? These things happened before in the 80s and 90s. How do we get our young people back in the Clifton community in the college? I remember when you had a DFP government where young people engaged into skills training program, eventually get them in that area. We have done some of these things, small industries, and people like Mr. G, had garment factory. Why? We have done these things before, now we can do it. And tonight, we want to stick to the facts. We don't want to go to the political issues. Let's face facts. Let's face reality. Let's look at the technologies available and let's use it to the best of our ability.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for your opening remarks. I really appreciate that. I mean, this is really what we're here for. We're here to highlight all the areas where opportunities exist. I mean, we do have the basic requirements, which is the people. If we look at Singapore as an example, I mean, they use their human resources as a basis for the development. Therefore, we have to use that. And I mean, I've looked at so many Dominicans everywhere, like yourself, like Anthony, like that. Well, they're all over the place and they're doing very well, getting on top of the business, the companies that they work with, top positions, getting a wealth of experience and knowledge doing this. So this knowledge, I mean, can redound to the benefit of the homeland. So what I'm saying is that, and I think what we'll all be saying tonight, we're at a junction now. We're 44 years old. I mean, 6 years from now, we'll be 50 years old as in a country. When a country gets to be 50 years old, like, there has to be some kind of a landmark thing you want to see. Here's what we've done. Here's how far we've come. Here's how much wealth our people have generated. Here's how the standard of living and the quality of life has improved from when we first started. I mean, we did not get independence from Britain just to say we have independence, but independence for what? It has to be independence to grow our people, to help our people to become, to self-actualize, and to become the best of what they can be. I mean, we know the famous saying that every ordinary person can do extraordinary things if they set their minds to it, and if they get the opportunity and the enabling environment in which to do that. So tonight, I'm happy that we have Dr. Greg Siragusa with us. I know he has a wealth of experience working in different countries, looking at agriculture, looking at agribusiness, look at the research, the science research behind some of that. So I'm delighted to have you with us, Greg, here tonight. I want to go over to you and ask you to introduce yourself to the people of Dominica, of course, and the people are listening all over the Caribbean and all over the globe. Later on, we'll acknowledge some of the fine folks who are with us on Facebook and on YouTube. I will try to acknowledge some of them a little bit later on as we go along. And we will be taking the calls of the people, and DJ Shan will help us to do that later on. So, Greg, I'd like to go over to you and tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, before you start talking about some of the things that you want to share with us tonight. Unmute your mic, though. Don't forget.
Thank you very much, Mr. G, and
we're good to go.
Everyone else, very nice to meet you, and congratulations to all the people of Dominica on number 44. And I think it's going to be very exciting to see what will happen when number 50 rolls around. Quite exciting.
Yes.
A little about myself. I was born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana, and I was there until I started college at LSU, at Louisiana State University, where I majored in microbiology. Before that, I actually had the opportunity as a much younger guy to work in a laboratory that was a microbiology lab. And I was 12 years old and was given a job washing dishes there. So I had a great start because I was interested in it. And my wife and I just went to New Orleans to celebrate the 50th anniversary of that little company. And that little company started with one man, his assistant, and one young guy to wash test tubes. And now it's in over 47 countries, the technology that they've developed. And so it always comes back to the grit and determination can be realized if you have good ideas, good people to carry it out, and take advantage of every opportunity, especially within a system of laws. And that's key. And we can talk more about that later on. But after LSU, I obtained my bachelor of master's degree there. I moved to the University of Arkansas, where I worked for a microbiologist named Dr. Michael Johnson. And that was probably the formative part of my scientific background. And it was there that I got very involved with food safety. After that, after graduating, my wife and I moved to South Central Nebraska. We moved into a town of 800 people on the plains of the United States. There was a research station there that was funded by the USDA, by the Agricultural Research Service. And it was in the middle of 100 square miles of land. This research center that brought people from all over the globe to conduct animal research. I was there for 10 years working on problems of food safety. After that, I moved to another USDA lab to work on poultry, and that was at the University of Georgia in Athens, Georgia. We were there 7 years. And then in 2007, an opportunity came up for me to join an old graduate school friend of mine in his company named AgTech. And AgTech was where I met Stevenson. And Mr. and Mrs. Bellot both worked for AgTech in Waukesha, Wisconsin, which is right outside of Milwaukee. And it was there that I began to see applications of all the science that I had been involved in previously: food safety, intestinal microbiology, analytical and diagnostic microbiology. And at that point, the small company, AgTech, was bought by Danisco. Danisco is a Danish biotech and food company, about 6,000 people. It was there that I had the opportunity to do work in not only Denmark, but also in Kenya, in Africa. About this time, the DuPont company came along and bought Danisco. So we went from AgTech, which was about 50 or 60 people, to Danisco, which was about 6,000 people, to DuPont, which was about 66,000 people. So we made a lot of change. But it was those experiences that really gave me perspective of what research is, what research can be, what scientific research needs in order to thrive and actually exist. And after working in the DuPont company for several years, it closed the site down here. I left and went to work for a company called Eurofins, which is a global food and biochemical analysis company. Eurofins, when I was there, asked me to set up a program in the microbiome space, and we can talk about that later. I'm going to use that as an example because it didn't go the way it was planned. I think the whole microbiome idea was still a little bit premature for most of the world. Long story short, I left Eurofins after 4 years and started my own company, Scout Microbiology, where I am today. We do consulting. We also do hands-on laboratory research with biotech and feed and food clients, such as Wasim. And that's where we are today. That's about my story.
Well, great story. I mean, it shows the diversity. You know, it shows how much of how much experience you've had in various places. Particularly like the idea of the exposure that you had in Africa, and the fact that we are still known as the nature island. Is some people say that Christopher Columbus might still recognize Dominica if he came to see it today because it is so unspoiled and untouched, as it were. And I think that this probably gives us a little advantage in planning going forward, because if we talk about agriculture and agribusiness as a major part of our economy, it means that the whole notion of going organic is key. Because I mean, yes, we can talk about food security, but I think when we talk about natural products, that means something, because the world today is looking for good quality foods. And as a researcher, you'd probably be able to endorse that. That's why I spoke earlier about niche markets. To me, it is essential that we cannot produce everything for the world. I mean, the world is just too big. We're too small. We're only 300 square miles. You talk about the company that you work with for 66,000 people. We have just about that is a population of Dominica. There's maybe about 3,000 or 4,000 more than that, maybe. So that just tells you that if this one company can employ 66,000 people, we can do something to employ 70,000 people and make sure everybody is fully employed and fully engaged and living a certain standard of living and a quality of life. And essentially, the notion of sustainability, because we are vulnerable to exogenous shocks like hurricanes and so on, but the notion of sustainability and resilience is key. But a country cannot be sustainable and resilient unless its people are sustainable and resilient. And that is why we're discussing tonight, because with the ideas we want is to let us do things, let us rethink, refresh, reset the button. And let us take a look now to see what it is that we can do and do well, that the world might want to buy from us, that they'll be willing to buy from us. I believe we can find a number of things, quite a few things that we'll talk about here tonight, which we can do. One of the things, obviously, Greg, that we will talk about tonight is the whole question of the emerging cannabis industry in Dominica, not in the world because it's there now in many countries. In Canada, it's there. The US is now thinking about going federal, passing some legislation to do this thing. And so no longer, if that happens at the federal level, it's at the state level in certain states. If it's done at the federal level, it means that in terms of the financial transactions to get paid for your cannabis oils or medicinal oils and the products, it means you will not have problems with the banks, right? The corresponding banks. It means be able to transfer. This is one of the key things that Dominic will be very concerned about in trade, is getting paid, right? And so I don't know whether you want to, but I will leave you a little later. We'll come back to you on that because there's so much to be said on it. Let me go over to Anthony because Anthony has worked in Dominica for quite some time. He's familiar with what's incidentally. I mean, the world knows by now that Dominica has an abundance of water, very, very good quality water, and I'm pretty sure that Anthony will be able to tell us about it. Certainly, it is one of the things I think we need to really capitalize on. We just can't have water just flowing into the sea like that and not making more use of it for various reasons. I mean, it's like I remember years ago when Dominica coconut products was there, we had this oils and fats protocols. Coconut was king because DCP was doing very well. Farmers are doing extremely well. As a very simple example, Anthony, if you have 5 million coconut trees on the island, each of those trees, if you take one coconut a day from that, that's 5 million coconuts you have every day. You know how much coconut water that is? It's like if you have all these crabs you have, if we produce those crabs in the forest, in the natural habitat, instead of having off season and on season, if they can harvest these crabs all year round, you know how much is a crab bag? It's 10 and 15 bucks people selling a crab bag. This is the most delicious thing in the world, that crab bag. Special crab, special taste, really fantastic. The world wants it. Everybody's rushing to get it. Why can't we have 1 million crab bags a week or a day? Let's let people sell crab bags. So let me go over to you, Anthony. You can see there's so many possibilities. But let's talk a little bit about your own experience and your own thoughts. And then I see that Dr. Peter Saint-Jean has joined us, so we'll introduce Dr. Peter Saint-Jean a little bit later on after you, Anthony. And he's going to talk to us about something that is very dear to my heart, something he's working on, something called peaceology. And I really want him to talk to us about that tonight because it will hopefully solve some of the problems, the social problems like crime and violence and so on. We want to eliminate that from our system. The country is too small to have that. We don't need that going forward. Anthony, let me go over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. G, and good evening to my fellow panelists, Jeff, Greg, Bernard, and Dr. Saint-Jean, Peter Saint-Jean. It's a pleasure to be on with you tonight. I am very honored to be part of this conversation. And so far, the words that have been spoken by the panelists seem to be very timely. In fact, this is a most timely conversation. Let me pause and say good night to the listeners and the viewers, and to Dominicans. I want to wish you a very happy 44th year of independence. And I've been following the festivities. It looks like we're all having a grand time. So as Mr. G said, my name is Anthony Drigo. I am originally from Castle Bruce, son of a preschool teacher. My dad oscillated between farming and fishing. So I went to the Castle Bruce Primary School, onto the grammar school, sixth form college. And in 1987, I left Dominica to attend college, university in the United States. And I got my degree in mechanical engineering. I came back to Dominica in January of 1990. So I was out for 3 years. Came back with a very young man with an engineering degree and found work. My first job was on a construction site, as a project engineer. The cruise ship berth at Portsmouth, Cabrits cruise ship berth, was actually my first project in Dominica as an engineer, and then moved on to the Deepwater Harbor, did that expansion project. And that's where I got my teeth cut, so to speak, in construction. That was in 1990. I did some work as a lecturer at the State College. Rupert Surrender was the director of the colleges, and he was my principal at Sixth Form College, and I was in Castlebrooks after the project doing farming, and he came to get me. He said, "We need you." So I went at the college and I taught some young engineers, and I'm specifically mentioning that because my experience at the State College was teaching young men and women who aspired to be engineers. So they had a building and civil engineering program. They had a mechanical and electrical engineering program. They had refrigeration program. They had mechanics and so on and so forth. And a lot of young men and women came out of that with life skills for those who wanted to go into the trades. And also some of them went on to do engineering at colleges outside of the US. I worked at the Wasco. I had 2 stints at the Wasco. First stint as a project engineer designing water systems all over Dominica as part of the rural water project. And then I worked at Dominico Coconut Products when Colgate Palmolive bought it over as the mechanical engineer there, and then went back to the Wasco and worked and managed the engineering department. So I do have a lot of experience working as an engineer in Dominica. I came to the US around 2001, I think, and since then I am currently located in the US. The topic tonight that we're looking at is making a fresh start, building a modern society. And the place I want to start with that, Mr. G, is to say that from the time I became aware of myself in the early 1970s, Dominicans have aspired to have an international airport. And since that time, the concept of how we're going to build an international airport has not changed. We still consider that we should tear down a mountain, fill in a few rivers, fill in a few valleys, so we can have a place where airplanes can land. So in all of this time, we've had leaders, political and business leaders who travel all over the world. We've had the internet at our fingertips that can show us examples of technologies being applied all over the world. And yet we have not been able to imagine a different solution for having international flights coming to Dominica, besides tearing down a couple mountains, losing up to 6 rivers, filling in valleys, making soils and places unstable. And that in itself embodies the story of Dominica as a country, as an island that we've been trying to develop. The very thing that makes Dominica beautiful, its ruggedness, is the very thing that has provided that challenge for us. And the answer has to be in engineering. It has to be in technology. If you live at the North Pole, you have to find engineering solutions that you don't freeze to death. If you live in the US and you are in the path of tornadoes, you have to find a way to design buildings that can give you a chance to survive tornadoes. We live in Dominica and we are at the mercies of a hurricane every year. We pray God that the hurricane bypasses us. But the only thing, one of the few things that we're sure of is that Dominica is going to get hit by a major hurricane again. So what are we doing in terms of planning, in terms of how we build to mitigate against that sort of threat? If we as a people, as a country, cannot look at ourselves, look at our circumstances, and see what are our risks, and look around the world, we don't even have to imagine solutions. We can look around the world and see what has been applied in other places and see how we can apply them to make our people more safe. I watch the news and I still see rocks falling on vehicles under the cliff. as you come into the city. You go to Guadeloupe and you see all over Guadeloupe they have chain link fence over those cliffs that prevents major rocks or anything from falling. Simple solutions that we as Dominicans feel that it's too much to implement. Why is it too much? And Bernard spoke about imagination and being able to change the perception of ourselves. And I believe that one of the things that afflicts us as Dominicans, especially when we go abroad and we see a better application, we come back to Dominica and say, what we have in Dominica is good enough. Because I remember when I came back to Dominica in 1990 as a young engineer, being introduced to AutoCAD and computers and that sort of thing. I was going around and getting service, and sometimes you would strike up a conversation with a business person or a political leader, and they would say, "Man, what do you think? You think you're still in the US? This is how we do things down here." So are we saying that top quality of life is good for a Dominican? Are we saying that to have a healthcare system where we don't have to do a GoFundMe to get someone out of the country for the simplest ailment is what is good enough for us? Why can't we aspire to have a country where we're self-sufficient? Why is it that the best aspiration for our young people is to look to migrate to another country? How can we apply some of our resources, our advantages, to make a quality of life better? Greg said he worked in a company that had 66,000 people. That means that it should not take much for a country of 66,000 people to provide a top-class quality of life for its citizens. It's only 70,000 people. Let's put it there. It's only 70,000 people. It's only, I don't know, 10 schools. It's only 150 miles of road. It's only one hospital. You know, what about that is a challenge to a country with the intellect and the brain power that we have? Dominica, my first job in Dominica was at the cruise ship berth at Portsmouth and the Deepwater Harbor. Do you know that the biggest cruise ships can dock in Dominica at those ports? And do you know that we did not have to dredge a single rock out of those harbors? Those ships come into our naturally deep waters. We happen to be also located in the center of the chain of the Caribbean islands, right next to the largest economy in the world. And we've not figured out that shipping and maritime activity can be an advantage for us. We've not figured that out. Why is it that is difficult to figure out? We accommodate the largest cargo ships coming from Japan and China at our Deepwater Harbor, and we're out 300 feet from shore with no dredging. It's a natural advantage. We lack that will to say, this is Dominica, and we can come up with proper solutions for our life in Dominica. We can use technology, we can use engineering, and we can make life much better and much simpler for our people. Mr. J, I'm going to stop there as the intro. There are some areas that we will flesh in. We can flesh out more on the water resources and our agro industry and all of those things. But that is what I want to talk about, is to really have us look starkly at ourselves and say that really and truly, can we not apply our minds and design a better quality of life for our people, a first class, a top class quality of life for our people?
Well, quite an introduction there as well, Anthony. And here's what I must say. So far, I'm finding there's a lot of meeting of the minds. I mean, trying to reimagine and trying to bring ourselves well into the 21st century based on the technology and the experiences that are available and the knowledge that is out there, that for all the world to see, we can see them too. But one of the things that you ended up talking about here is the question of making the quality of life better. So while we do all of that, we're going to talk about all the details in a while. After Bernard is going to tell us all about the knowledge industries and so on, and everybody's going to share their thoughts and the ideas on where we go from here to build the economy, build the society. But I want to go over to Dr. Peter Senja, because where you left off was the question of making the quality of life better. And we know, even if you're very wealthy and you live in a neighborhood, nice house and so on, you have 10 butlers, you have 10 chefs in your house, but then you can't get out on the street because there's crime and there's a lot of social instability because some people next door, life is not so good. And there's a lot of stress and depression and everything because of the quality of life and the living standard. I want to go over to Dr. Peter Senja. Let him tell us a little. Everybody knows about Dr. Peter Senja, but I will still let him tell us about himself a little bit because Dr. Peter Senja, he has never stopped studying. He has never stopped improving his knowledge base in so many fields to perfect what he has come to call peaceology. And this is something that I'm very fascinated by, and I'm happy that he's here with us to tell us about that, because that is where he's hoping that will make the quality of life really better, the social life better, especially for the young people of the country. Dr. Peter Senja, I'm delighted to introduce you tonight. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Jeff, good night. Anthony, good night. Bernard, good night. Greg, good night. And all listeners, Mr. G is always good. I am Peter Saint-Jean from the village of Trafalgar. I am the founder of something I refer to as peaceology, that I define as the science and practice of sustainable and profitable peacefulness. The definition has emerged from the science and practice of making peace profitable to a whole variety of things. As you know, whenever we do work, the idea of research is to search again. And as we move forward, we have to make our ideas better. I am currently the incoming, I'm the Dean of Humanities and Social Sciences at North Park University in Chicago. I'm also the interim Dean of College of Arts and Sciences. I'm a full professor here at North Park University in Chicago. Actually, I am just ending a class. I'm also doing a master's in clinical mental health counseling, and I'm doing an internship on the south side of Chicago, north side. So I just finished internship supervision, and on Wednesday tomorrow I have a class on human growth and development. I am still learning. Mr. G, I just got in the mail today. I spent a couple hours on it trying to get a little brain break. I got a couple books on the accordion, you know, and I started playing the steel pan over the weekend, you know.
I saw you playing the accordion and the steel pan.
Yeah, man, I'm trying to learn as much as I can. And I really like what Anthony said. Anthony, you have a great name. That's my brother's name, Anthony Saint-Jean. That's actually my mother's maiden name, so I'm an Anthony as well. I'm Saint-Jean Anthony. If we were using the women's last name, I would be an Anthony instead of a Saint-Jean. But I mean, just to cut to the chase, Anthony, what I liked about what you said was about the quality of life and how various applications of sciences and how we can have formal applications to make our life better. And the example you gave is about how engineering, how proper thinking and designing and proper schemas and having a system that if something breaks, you can go back and you don't have to destroy and throw out everything. And you can test things out before you make big, expensive mistakes, right? So very similarly, as a social scientist, in peaceology, in the social science, I'm not going to go down my credentials, but there's mental health science, there's business and different components to it. The whole idea is a simple one, that as Mr. G said, if we have so many things that we can get because we have worked hard, because we are healthy, how are we going to be able to keep the things that are dear to us? It doesn't matter how many airports we build. It doesn't matter how many schools we build. It doesn't matter all of those things we do if we are not able to sustain our life. Very, very important, especially post-COVID era, is the importance for us to be able to find peace, happiness, and purpose within ourselves, within our families, within our community, within our regions, and within our world. And what I found out, I wrote a piece, Mr. G, I sent it to you this afternoon, a piece on Routledge Companion for Peace and Conflict Study. If any of you now just went into Google and you put in Making Peace Profitable, you will see a TEDx talk of mine but you also see a chapter that I wrote in Rutledge that is talking about developing a culture of peace, and and creating an economy of peace. And I say beginning in Chicago. I wanted it to be beginning in Dominica, although we have Dominica, we're still ahead because last year we purchased Peaceology Acres. That's 18 acres of land where we actually implementing the idea of making peacefulness sustainable and profitable, right? In the village of Trafalgar, working with so many folks. So basically, with my brief introductory statement, what I would like to say is whatever we say tonight, we are oftentimes concerned about the cost of crime. I have moved away from that paradigm. I'm no longer so much identifying myself as a criminologist, because I noticed actually that we criminologists sometimes maybe even produce more drama around the creation of crime. So, you know, like in Chicago, there's a Chicago crime lab at the University of Chicago where I graduated. And I say, actually, that's where they make the crimes, in the crime lab, you know. And even myself, I will take responsibility for that. Sometimes even when I listen to some of the ways that I have been kind of cantankerous and assertive and aggressive around this issue of crime, I may have even contributed to language and attitudes of violence and crime by the posture of the training of criminology. And what I have had to do as someone who's leading the world in peaceology is to recalibrate our thinking, right? There's the first law of physics tells us, you know, our object at rest is at rest unless it is confronted by a force greater than itself. The second law says that object in motion stays in motion unless it's confronted by a force greater than itself. But the very third law is very important. To every force is an equal and opposite reaction. That is to say that what you resist persists. That's why the war on drugs, the war on crime, the war on poverty, the war on violence will never work. Why? Because there's violence in nonviolence. Nonviolence has violence in it. So the idea is not about trying to kill the thing that we do not want, because killing something, we just want somebody else to kill us. The idea is finding what we want and creating structures of how we can make them sustainable and profitable. Profit is a simple thing. It's a return that is larger than your deposit. So I just said good night to my distinguished panelists, my friends. I say good night to you. You may say, all five of you may say good night to me, and those types of things. So basically what I just want to deposit, Mr. G, is to say, let us think about not just responding to the cost of crime, but responding to the profits of peace. Let us think about building peaceful nature isle and be able to have sustained prosperity, economic, environmental, physiological, sociological, cultural, psychological, and spiritual. And this is our gift to the world. I'm saying this personally because I'm from Trafalgar. At the Trafalgar Falls is where peaceology was born. While I'm bathing under this Mama Falls and Papa Falls, and while I'm listening to all of my elders telling me so many things about how we need to keep our culture going, I would like us to be able to develop the industry of peace, but mostly focusing on the culture of peace and focusing on our health, our mental health, our physical health. And I would argue that we have proof that the legal system, especially for ministers of national security and looking at police forces to lead us towards peacefulness, that has been a failed model. It doesn't mean to say that there's no place for them, but we cannot afford to let ministries of national security and police departments be responsible to lead us in efforts for peacefulness, because actually they have the monopoly over violence, and much of what they do is try to preserve that monopoly over violence, right? It may sound like a very big statement. It doesn't mean that we are trying to put them aside, but we are saying we as normal, regular citizens, the great culture we have, the great love that we have for ourselves, and the ability that we have to make good things grow, let us put that in application into industry for a better future. So I look forward to saying more on that, and I listen to the rest of my colleagues with this opening remark. I hope it's helpful for what I may have to contribute in between. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, and thanks a lot, Dr. Peter Saint-Jean. I mean, certainly we look forward to hearing a lot more about peaceology. And you see, what I liked about it is that you actually bought an estate, 17 acres? Actually
17.998, so I usually say 18. Close enough.
So 18 acres of land. You've bought the land, you've invested in it. So it's not just an academic thing that you're doing. You actually invest in hard-earned capital in there, and you're building something, and you're hoping to get some result. That's what I like, because you see, when an entrepreneur does something, you invest when you expect to do it well so that you can have a return. So we're really looking forward to see what comes up and to see what the impact is going to have on the overall society in Dominican, especially the youth. But tonight we're getting close to getting now to the time when we're looking at the nitty gritty of all the specific recommendations we want to make, new thoughts, thought provoking ideas that we want to get a new paradigm. We have to make this paradigm shift. We cannot do the same old and expect to get a different result. So if you look back at the last 44 years, are we where we would have liked to have been by now when compared to some of our sister countries, other countries like Singapore and so on? Are we there yet? So we need to tell ourselves, no, we're not. And so what it is that we need to do about it. So I love what we're doing here tonight. We're looking at the big picture, the whole thing. We're not taking a little piecemeal approach. We're taking a holistic approach to this development, not of the country and the economy, but of the person as well, which is what Dr. Peter Saint-Jean is talking about, because people are the center of it all. So I want to go back to Bernard, and let me just tell DJ Shan that we will start taking the calls of the public. So DJ Shan, before I go to Bernard, I'm going to let you give the public the telephone numbers that they can call. And then when we have a call, you will interrupt us. You can be very rude about it because the people's voices must be heard. Let me know, make me a good sign that I can see, so I know we have to stop and take a call from the people. That's very important to us to hear from, especially at this time of our independence. We know we have lots of Dominicans and visitors in Dominica now for the celebrations. We want to take their calls. So go ahead and give out the numbers, and then I'll go over to Bernard after.
All right, thank you, Mr. G. The numbers are 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257, and if you're calling from the overseas line, 305-432-9624. Let me just repeat those numbers again. The numbers are 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257, 305-432-9624.
Thanks a lot, DJ Shan. So you let me know when you have a call, and we'll just take it.
All right, yes, sir.
But Bernard, I want to go over to you now, because I want to go back and talk about the knowledge industry. Because you are an expert in that. You've been involved in that for many, many years. You're teaching a lot of people. And I think a lot of the young people in Dominic would be very interested in that kind of industry, because I've seen a lot of my kids, friends over here. Most of them work from home, making good money, buying the houses. They're working from home. They're in the knowledge industries. Let's talk a little bit about that, Bernard.
Certainly. And let me start by saying, a knowledge industry of a sort has always existed in human existence, right? Because if you look at the reality of human production, it is about human ideas. Humans come up with ideas to transform the natural world into human resources. Unless the human mind gets involved, every plant is just a weed, right? Every mineral is simply a rock. Every, aspect of our physical world is simply as it exists without any intrinsic value. But when the human mind comes up with ideas, imaginative ideas about how to improve human life, then we can use those ideas to reconstruct the physical environment to human ends, to reconstruct our environment, to create human experiences. And it is at that point that the natural world yields what we would call resources. So no resources exist absent the human mind's involvement in how to utilize them through productive gains to create a better life for human beings. So the point I'm making is that it all comes back to human imagination, knowledge about how to manipulate natural laws and how to manipulate nature to create products and services that create human value. I always tell folks, and I tell that to young engineers when I do guest lectures at colleges, that a cell phone is simply embedded ideas. It's a bunch of ideas
Bernard,
captured by atoms in certain configurations.
Bernard, can I interrupt you? I told DJ Shan he could be rude about interrupting. Does DJ Shan seem to have an urgent call? DJ Shan, if you want to take that call, I'll go back to Bernard shortly.
Sure.
Local line, good night.
Yes, good night, DJ Shan. Good night.
Go right ahead.
Yeah. Why want to get? Why want to get? First of all, is the code number for the Virgin Island.
The code number for the Virgin Islands.
Yes, Saint Thomas and Saint Croix.
I suspect he's got
340.
you
340.
340.
340.
Yeah, 340.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You see, we provide all kind
That
of
was easy. That was an easy one.
we provide all kind of valuable services here tonight to the public. So Bernard, go right ahead.
Yes. And it's all about knowledge. You see, we just shared some knowledge and made his life better.
Yeah.
Yes. So the point, and it comes out to the point. I mean, everything that we do is dependent on human beings figuring out how to use the natural world and to use natural laws. And cell phones, as I was said, is embedded ideas. Somebody has the ideas how to make these electromagnetic waves work. Somebody understands how to put chemicals together to create a battery. Somebody understands how to do the mathematics to create digital codes that make the telecommunications work. Someone has figured out how to use light, which is what electromagnetic waves are, the stuff that transports your voice, thousands of miles, is essentially light waves, different frequencies. We call them different things, but they're all essentially light waves. And it's human understanding of these natural laws that allows us to then co-opt these laws and capture them in our gadgets. But really, our gadgets is really embedded ideas caught in reality. And many of these ideas are ghosts. I mean, we use ideas created by Maxwell, has been dead hundreds of years. And so they live on in the ghosts, in the machines, as it were. But ideas is what it's all about. And not only in equipment or gadgets, but also in our legal system, in our political systems and so forth. So it's all about ideas. It's all about how do we figure out how to have better human experiences. And so that has existed throughout human history. It is what created the agricultural revolution. It's what created first civilizations. We created religion. We created writing. We created all those things. Again, human ideas, symbolic representation that allows us to create value in the human world, and we're moving forward. But what has happened is increasingly that sector has expanded. As we've become more self-sufficient, as more of us can produce, less of us need to produce food, less of us need to work in factories, then we have available brain space to create more ideas and to manipulate ideas and to manipulate, importantly, symbols, because more and more are becoming symbolic analysts. What that means is we take those ideas, we take the representation of ideas, and then we manipulate them to give direction to others, to create factories, to create blueprints that can now be created into products. So we've become more and more symbolic analysts.
Bernard, let's take a quick call. I'll come right back.
Good night.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening to the panel, distinguished.
Hello, how are you?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Very well.
Yeah. I'm hearing a discussion here tonight, and then I'm comparing Dominica over these last couple of decades, and it's like two separate worlds. In that economy that Dominica has become, none of those types of plans are figured out in that economy. That economy is low-tier paying jobs for hotel workers and those kinds of concepts is in that economic model that is in Dominica. So I hear the brother on peaceology and I support him fully. I hear my brother Drigo and I hear the others. But this situation and the solution that we're talking about to this place, a mental transformation has to take place. And I think what was critical about things like 79 and 80s and so, I think a certain generation had a moment to learn from another generation. I think we need a juncture like this to happen in this era in regard to all these conversations that you guys are having. I think what a critical part of that transformation that we're talking about has to be this youth seeing a moment of learning from it. I think that is a very critical part in that transformation you guys are talking about because of what has happened over the last 25, 30 years in the country. I applaud you guys for the conversation. I'm listening. Peace and blessings.
Well, thanks a lot for that call. I mean, this is really a good contribution, Bernard. I mean, he's right on point.
He's right on point. He's right on point in terms of the transformation of our thinking. As I said earlier, we need to raise our eyes up and said, listen, we have to start thinking of ourselves as producers of technology, not simply consumers. We have to start thinking of ourselves as technologists and creatives, which we naturally are. We need to start thinking of ourselves as able to participate at the forefront of global industry and to work those industries and to build and be entrepreneurial and competitive and take our place at the global table as equal partners. But it is a mental transformation because for the most part, we as Dominicans, we don't think of ourselves in that way, but we are perfectly capable. There are many, many Dominicans leading world-class organizations around the world. There are many very top-notch engineers, scientists, social scientists, and so forth, leading prestigious institutions and doing magnificent work and leading the teams that are in fact creating those realities for others. We have the intellectual and human capital and the drive as Dominicans, because we have a point to prove, to do those things. The question is, how do we put this together at headquarters, which is Dominica, but understand that we are a global nation. We should be a seamless global nation, and that Dominica exists around the world, and harness those to make our headquarters, which is Dominica, more prosperous. And we can do this thing. Of course, there are political hindrances to that, where that's not the focus of this discussion. But the reality is the particular institutions that you have governing your country, running your country, and the cultural attitudes that those lead to create profound hindrances. And that's why you will find Dominicans excel in other systems which are open and transparent to a greater degree and based on meritocracy. And that these systems, when you plug in the hardworking people of Dominica and people who study and love intellectual development, when you plug them into those systems, they flourish. Unfortunately, you don't have the same ecosystem on the island, so that when you plug those people into the system, they perish, or at least they quickly leave. And so we have to understand at a system level how to transform the ecosystem to allow these things to take root. But there are ways to do this, and there are paths to do this, and there are ways to bootstrap ourselves into this different mind that the caller talked about. And when I speak to young people at the colleges and at high school, they are very enthusiastic about these ideas because they are digital natives. They're born into this. They embrace this. This is their life. All of us here are digital migrants. We've moved into this. Some of us have helped build this, but it was not part of who we were when we were born. And they're enthusiastic about this, and we must embrace that reality. We must say these are digital natives. They will embrace these ideas, and we have to capitalize on these ideas. We have to train them with the right curriculums in school. We need to make them enthusiastic about this job. Not everyone in Dominica needs to be a lawyer or a doctor, but that is the same kind of colonial aspirations that has not yet been transformed. But people like us need to inspire the youth and set up programs and summer camps and so forth to get them to gravitate to what they're already natural to, which is the world of symbolic analysis, which is digital technology. And they're very well-paying jobs because, as we said, the ability to manipulate nature is based on the ideas and the understanding of data. And so you can create those ideas and move up the value chain, while others can make them and manufacture them and so on, which is valuable. But the top end of the value chain, of the food chain, is those who imaginatively create new concepts of how human life can be improved, develop blueprints around those ideas, and then transfer those to others to have them built. And that is where we need to move into, because we have a natural Creole vibe that we need to capitalize on. Our natural creativity and our vibe allows us to have an interesting perspective on life, and we must understand that perspective and transform those into technological products and build an economic engine built around the fourth industrial revolution, which I will talk to a lot more as we go along.
Yes, and of course, as you say that, I it was remiss of me not to have included, when I was introducing my discussion tonight, the notion of cultural industries. So as you speak to that now, you can see now the Creole thing. We have a Creole thing which we have not realized that we have a real thing, which is something that the world will buy. I don't think we really fully understand and have grasped that Creole thing, that gum, the Peter Sencha, you know that the mode of dress, the cuisine. See, when I talk about crabbacks, I'm not just talking about some ordinary. This is a real delicacy, that people pay plenty money. People paying so much money for what they call that thing they kick from the eggs in Russian River there. they caviar.
Caviar.
The people paying so much for. And listen, crabbacks much nicer than that. They'll pay a lot more for crabbacks than they'll pay for caviar if we do it well. But I mean, as you say about that, as I go over to and I know you'll talk a lot about that to try to really motivate some of the young people out there, but we'll talk about that later. As I go over to Jeff, Jeff, Bernard talked about the evolution.
So just before you go over to Jeff,
let's take a call.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Good 95, good night.
Yes, good evening, Mr. G. Good evening, gentlemen.
How are you doing?
I'm good. Great discussion. I'm listening. Good evening to the panel, esteemed panel, I must say. I know you guys are getting into the meat of the conversation right now, but I just want to call in while it's early and to make just a few brief comments. I think it was Greg when he introduced himself and said what his experience has been. He said that all of that must be done within a system of laws. And I would really like him to speak a little more to that, exactly what he means by that. I will also add that the conversation is a great conversation. And I think the caller prior to me calling kind of alluded to it. It goes back to the whole question of political will. Political will of whoever is in charge to govern, to manage the economy. Think of the government as a board of directors. So you have a company and you have a board of directors that will formulate policy to direct what happens in the company, how the company progresses, whether the company is doing well or not. So think of it this way. So if the political will is not there, and I know sometimes we try to have this conversation and see, well, we can be political. Everything is political. Everything is politics. I mean, politics determine whether you live, you eat, you drink, where you sleep, how you drive your car, on which side of the road, and everything. So in terms of the system of laws, there is what is referred to as the rule of law for the environment. In other words, to what extent do we recognize our environment? We do not degrade it, and therefore we lose our natural resources. The rule of law of social development. I think Tony made the point quite adequately of the quality of life. The rule of law of economic development. Are we doing it in a very fair and non-corrupt way? The rule of law of ethical investing. When people come to do business in the country, we're now running a CBI. Are we operating that in an ethical manner? So all of that boils back to political will and within the system of law, which I think Greg rightly pointed out to. So I would just like you guys to, Greg in particular, to elaborate on that exactly when he speaks of the system of laws. What exactly was his thought process there? But great discussion, and I'm listening.
Well, thanks a lot. I mean, great contributions coming from our callers tonight. To Greg, maybe you might want to have a go at this right away.
Sure. When I said that, what I was really thinking of was intellectual property and protecting intellectual property rights. And the only way for that to happen is that there's a system of law with, for instance, within the United States, we have the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, the USPTO. But having that credential is protected by a part of our government in its constitution. Globally, we have world patent offices, and having that protection gives you wider protection for the investment you made into a technology, into a process, into a product, an invention of some sort. And without that, a nation this size, and I will get back to some other thoughts about the advantages of being the size Dominica is. But for a nation of the size of Dominica, and for an outside group to come in and make an investment in something, before they do that, if it's a company that is a publicly traded company, for instance, they can only do that if they know that their investment has a modicum of protection by the legal system, by a system of laws. And that sounds really straightforward, but in actuality, it is quite difficult because people have to respect that. And I think right now, as a big example, people in the United States are in industries are saying our intellectual property is being pilfered by other big nations. Well, that might be the case, but within this country, we have protection for those patents, and to continually invest and get that technology to grow, it is important that it is protected. And I want to use another example of earlier in this conversation, Bernard, you used the word a renaissance. And if we think back to historically, what people call the Renaissance period in Europe, which was mainly in Mediterranean Europe, what fueled that Renaissance? And the short, very quick answer is what fueled it was a big influx of funding, money, and people who valued where they put their money, not just for art. I mean, that's what we see today, the great artists of the time and architects of the time, but the engineers of the time and the musicians of the time, they had backing from people who valued research. And they knew that the money that they were putting for artists to do things might or might not have come into anything that was tangible. It was a bit of a risk. At the same time, even though the countries of Europe were still farming in that part of Europe, which was mainly Central and Southern Europe, there were systems of laws. And that's why people could do things that were risky and why money could go to scientific research. And we have this big thing that we call the Renaissance. I see no difference between that situation and the country of Dominica. The country, and from talking to Jeff a lot about this, the country has a size that, in my opinion, is an advantage. It has 70,000 people, and that is a big advantage. If, as a government, a smaller nation wanted to do something with 70,000 citizens, it's probably very doable. For me in the United States to want to do something like that, it's a pretty formidable task because there's so much competition and there's so many layers above the small private inventor or the small private business. So I see the size and the population of Dominica as a big advantage. And as far as the Renaissance goes, we are so blessed to be alive in this era because of the great equalizer of the internet and the World Wide Web. So if you follow the Khan Academy model, Saul Khan said his goal was that every man, woman, and child on the planet would have the opportunity to get an education. The only reason he can do that is because he knows that the internet has put the blanket and leveled the playing field. And so that knowledge is not just in the hands of the few. So I hear the panelists talk about their individual areas, and I think the knowledge economy is just the means to an end. I like to say that, ideas and thoughts and apps and computer science-driven virtual realities, they're not tangible. We can't eat them. But what we can do is we can use all that to let people who previously didn't have an opportunity to grow. And what is limiting now, what is rate limiting, is not their financial backing necessarily. It's not their information, because they have free information. All the world's information is virtually online. So it's not information. What's limiting is their own drive, their own imagination, and their own energy. And if that's the case, then we're all on an equal playing field. From my experience, very briefly, my experience in Kenya, what I observed was a big generational gap. And I was working with a group at a university, and a small university outside of Nairobi. And what was interesting was that the professors, who were basically my age, my vintage, so most of us finished our education in the 80s and 90s, our formal education. And most of these students were student age. They were mostly under 30 years old. Their level of knowledge was so great. And it was purely because the country invested in a really good system of electronic communication. Internet service in Kenya was excellent. And I mean, even when I was out, doing wildlife observation out in the forest, way far away from any city, I still had excellent internet connection. And it was because the government did that. Well, the kids of the school, they had a lot of excitement, but their professors were still thinking in this older mode. And I don't blame them for that. I was one of them. But we were the rate limiting stuff in that case. I see a country like Dominica has youthful energy, and that youth has the advantages of everything it has in their palms of their hands through their cell phone. The system of laws, I think, are things that have to be mimicked. Just like, the example I'll give, the United States Constitution, it was certainly mimicked on other things. It wasn't its own invention. And I think that's doable if there's a will. The value that a country places on research, I think, is going to dictate its ability to be independent. Right now, in this country, it's very hard for academics to do research on their own, because the only way they can get grant money is through writing big grants. Not every idea needs a big grant. So in a culture that potentially could flourish off of supporting smaller projects instead of these huge mega grants, I think could go very far. And that was another area that I hope maybe we could talk about, was how will the educational system of not only Dominica, but its affiliation with the University of the West Indies in the whole area, how can it outcompete for scientists and engineers to come there and conduct research and make the environment for them to do their research very hospitable? It doesn't have to be that the citizens of Dominica will own that technology, but it can still be researched there. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, and I will come back to that, because I think it's important. I want to put it out to you, Greg, when we come back to you a little later on. Let's talk about research on the island, because all the things that we're talking about is going to require research. We talk about agriculture, agribusiness, the new cannabis frontier, and so on, all that. You need research. You need a good laboratory. And obviously, the island may or may not have the resources to put down a modern lab, but there may be people who may be willing to invest in a lab if they have the right conditions and if they can get a return on their investment. Maybe the island itself might be able to raise the money to do it. But I think this research you're talking about is key to all of it, because Bernard is saying the same thing. And you're saying the same thing. Everybody's saying the same thing. The callers are saying the same thing. Jeff, I want to go over to you. Let's talk a little bit now about the areas that I know that you're concerned with, that you believe Dominica can have some clear advantages on, not only in terms of production, but in terms of export marketing and creating a niche market out there.
Well, let's look at the reality of, as Dr. Siragusa says, Greg, the population size. For example, right now, we are importing over $7 million worth of chicken, just chicken. And these are numbers coming from the Central Statistics Office in the Commonwealth of Dominica. And these numbers actually higher for 2022. But guess what? A company like ours invested, try to work with the government, but we want to get in the way. So we invested in our own and we started a hatchery on the island. Well, a lot of people started getting the chickens from Barbados, and when they do the math, they're not realizing what goes into effect. Actually, the landing costs sometimes more because they don't take into effect the picking up the chicks at the airport, wiring the money ahead of time, give them poor cash flow because they have to pay 2-3 weeks ahead of time. And they need that $20,000-$30,000 to continue to work to employ people. They can do that. What we did, we started our own hatchery on the island, and the farmers of Dominica have been supporting the product. Let's look at easy numbers: 7 million, and by the way, that's US dollars, okay? Just chicken. 70,000 people in Dominica. Out of the 70,000 people, let's say 20,000 people between kids who can eat a whole wing or drumstick, a piece of a chicken, or some of these people may be vegetarian. So let's look at 50,000 people. 50,000 people, that's 50,000 birds. Now, if out of these 50,000 people, let's say these people eat chicken just twice a week, out of 7 days a week, just twice a week, that's 100,000 birds. Numbers don't lie. One chicken got 2 wings, one chicken got 2 drumsticks. So these are ways we can grow our poultry industry while we are actually increasing production. We are actually decreasing our import bill. So this is ways we are talking about. That's why Dr. Siragusa is talking about the importance of laws to protect intellectual properties and laws to protect your industry. So look at this. If the government decide, you know what, we are going to invest more into the poultry industry, we want to expand in the poultry industry, and then they go to the farmers and think about, you start with simple numbers. Let's do easy math. 100 farmers. 100 farmers employ, each of those farmers employ 5 people. That's 500 jobs. You grow this industry, then you start exporting. Before you know it, just in poultry alone, you could create easily 25 to 100 jobs to 5,000 jobs within 2 to 3 years. These are the areas we have to look at. What do we consume in Dominica the most? We eat a lot of chicken on the island, and chicken is a great source of protein. And Dr. Greg Siragusa, one of the things that he is very good at doing research on is chicken, and he can tell you some of that later. But these are simple ways where we can make our economy grow in the poultry sector. Now, I must say that after many years of writing letters to the government of the Commonwealth of Dominica, we have given them some great plans, and they actually finally put it onto this year's 2022 budget, that they want to increase and help the poultry sector in Dominica. And I recommend them for that. Actually, we're in discussion with them trying to see how we can grow that. But let's hope this is not paperwork and it actually happened. But when you want to grow in industry, you're talking about $250,000. Well, that's really like a drop in the bucket. We can grow this country poultry sector significantly to the point where we can export. And as we speak, Mr. G, that I got a call from our neighboring island, Montserrat, Antigua. They have actually decided, after using some of the samples from our birds in their country, they were able to prove, yes, the birds we're supplying them is zero from antibiotic free. Now we have a new opportunity in exporting birds to those islands. As a matter of fact, the boat just loaded tonight from Portsmouth on its way to Montserrat. We can grow this industry significantly. Another thing too, we have done at our labs, we have taken samples, and people may not know this, we have limestone in Dominica that has made an expect calcium level into animal feed. We have done the work on it, we have tested it, and the limestone in Dominica has been approved to be able to use as an ingredient into animal feed. Now let's look at cassava. Cassava has been tested and proven to be a great source of fiber and an alternative to wheat. What is going to happen? Let's look at Ukraine. And Dr. Siragusa there, he can tell you, we're working for a huge company, won't call your name, that do business with Ukraine. A lot of people not notice this. Ukraine produces most of the world's wheat, and the price of wheat went up. And a company in the United States make an ingredient to grow with them into seed treatment to help wheat. Why don't we look at cassava? We have done the work. we have proved to them that cassava can be a true alternative to wheat. Why don't we start a cassava industry, decrease importation of wheat, and start factories where we can turn cassava and have cassava mills where just you have wheat mills? This is what we're talking about in agriculture. Now, this is just poultry and animal feed. A bag of animal feed in Dominica today is about 65 EC dollars, which is over 22 US dollars. I mean, Dr. Siragusa probably shaking his head going, wow, we should probably start a feed mill, Dr. Siragusa. But this is the reality. Using the resources you have, doing the research you have it. Now you have Ross University in Portsmouth closed, the medical college. There's a lot of equipment there, if they're still there, and the facility can be used as a modernized center in the Caribbean for science and technology development throughout the region. These are the technologies and the ideas we're talking about, and this doesn't take much. Let's look at, okay, let's say what is passport money or what the government say, we would like to invest, $50 million every 2 years into research and development. Well, we have plants we can do research in. A lot of people don't know this. The work has been done on bay leaf. Bay leaf is one of the leaves that has one of the most antimicrobial properties. It fights bad bacteria. We have a lot of this in abundance. In agriculture, we're just talking about plants and crops. Another area that we have in Dominica, people don't notice that's a multi-million-dollar business we can generate from a government subsidy company, Doasco. The waste treatment plant we have Baytown. And Dr. Siragusa can tell you is a very similar situation that happening right here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's called Milloganite. The waste treatment, you collect all the sewage system in the Roseau environment area as far as maybe even Salisbury into the whole Roseau area as far south as even Point Michel. Connect that, you collect all the sewage, you treat that plant sewage very well. The rest from there, after you treat that sewage, you don't even have to use really chemicals. You can use probiotics. And we know some of those strains like the Bacillus amalgamatum, they have shown to work very well against those wastes. And then you change that, you treat it, you get in, you pump the ones that you treat into the ocean, and then the rest of it, you collect it and you turn it into natural fertilizer. That's a multi-million-dollar project. How much fertilizer are we importing in Dominica today? So we're not here just to talk about the science we do and we think this is just an idea. This is actually facts. This is things that's happening. And if we are serious about research, if we are serious about agriculture, we need to invest in research. We saw what happened with COVID-19. These people who started doing antibody tests, people thought they were crazy. Well, what happened? How the vaccine came on? Through the antibodies test, they did the research, they did, and they developed the vaccine from there. So why can Dominica be, first of all, the first Caribbean island to be 100% probiotic food, burning antibiotic into its food supply chain? Why don't we be the first country to look at what we call natural fertilizer from waste treatment? We have the plant already at Baytown. We upgrade the plant, invest in that, and create jobs. So imagine you have a feed mill that can employ 40 to 50 people. You grow the industry like goat milk, for example. And Dr. Siragusa can speak even detail more into that. Yeah, we work together, but he's the CSO, he's the chief scientist officer. I'm just a businessman, okay, behind the scene science and the research, okay. So what we are saying is, look at goat, for example, the price of goat milk, goat cheese. Why don't we invest, instead of investing into many hotels? Yes, we need hotels, and we are not saying no, but why do we invest into manufacturing, where we can look at our goat milk and start creating our own goat cheese and have to produce fresh goat milk you can go to the grocery store and purchase. Other areas that I can speak of is that we have also looked at other ingredients in Dominica that we can use to make animal feed. We also have some of these ingredients that they use all the time that right here in Dominica that can be grown. You don't have to import it. Cassava alternative for wheat. We also have some of these other protein plants that we grow in Dominica that can be used. It's a matter of doing the research properly, and as Greg said, put the right laws in place and to govern it well, and you can create this industry that can bloom for us. Because as I said earlier, when the trade minister, if I was the trade minister, I'll be embarrassed in saying that 80% of the food we consume are imported. I'll be very embarrassed to make that statement. But I want to say to the government of Dominica, the people of Dominica, there's hope. And the hope I want to give to people of Dominica is this: let's invest in our young people. Let's look at our colleges or institutions. Let's start at the primary school level. Why do we have every child must go to a high school? People like myself didn't graduate high school in Dominica. My friend Peter says, we work together. He can tell you that when we didn't pass the common entrance exam, but we didn't stop. We continued from the junior secondary program, and then you have the technical Clifton Community, Dupuy Community College. We need to look at education system, go from the primary school, and we should not have those kids who are 10, 12, 11 years old, make them must go to high school, but continue, start the junior secondary program, start a technical skills training program like the youth skills training program that they did. And that's why things worked very well in the 80s and the 90s. The Freedom Party government, what did they do? They invest in a technical college. They invest in the young people in the skills training program, because it's not every child's going to be a doctor. It's not every child's going to be a pilot. You need farmers, you need carpenters, you need engineers, yes, but you also need the basic things as the guys who are able to go out there and do the basic things that we need. What do we learn from COVID? Now, essential workers has become a big thing. I can tell you, I can't even get employees to work. I have to be competing wages to be able to get people to work for us. And Dr. Siragusa, he can tell you that. That's why those basic skills are important. And to do this correctly, you need to go back to the education system and look at your education system and say, wow, at 11, 12 years old, girls are normally maturing earlier than boys. So we should continue that program system into the junior secondary program and goes into the people like Drigo graduated from the sixth form college, and you have those technical skills set up, and that's how you grow a country, to get them young people involved in livestock, get young people involved in other areas and skills where we can develop our country. What happened in Maria? After Maria, because we didn't have a vibrant skills training program, we had to import people to build homes and fix roofs. These are the problems that we have. And let me make it clear. A lot of people ask me this question. Jeff Bellot, if you were given your position to be Minister of Agriculture, how are we going to fix it? How are we going to fix it? You bring the technical officers together, your field officers together, and the people in agriculture. Let's look at the data. How much food do we import? What do we import the most? What are the areas where, what do we have we can use? And when you put all this data together, you do the research together, you develop a program to this. And then what you do, which the government said they're going to be doing, I hope they do because of the proposal we wrote to them, is to start implementing a tax on the local product that you produce on the island. For example, you should not be paying I'm getting fertile eggs into Dominica for duty, because this is a raw ingredient that's going to develop into a chick to help the farmers. What do? You impose a tax for imported chicken coming to Dominica. Therefore, that put the local farmer at a very competitive edge, that he now can grow his industry, he can grow more people. And if you import those chicken, these people now have to pay a higher tariff. So people are forced to buy the local product and healthier product. That's one of the ways you can grow a country in the produce that we have.
Well, Jeff, you just really skirted the surface there, because there's so many more items. You talked about bailiff, and there's so many more things that you can talk about in terms of products. And I know that Greg will help us out, because he's going to, maybe when you come back to him, he will tell us the research that you need to do to give effect in order to translate these ideas from paper and from our minds into reality, projects on the ground that can generate jobs and wealth and income and export revenue and so on. You see, but when I start listening to Jeff, I realize that there's so much more that we could talk about. I understand that somebody posted a thing on Facebook, I think, on the internet, showing watermelons being sold in Dominica for $30. I don't know if that is true. One watermelon for $30. I'm not sure if that is true. I hope it's not true, because I mean, you can't import a watermelon and sell it for $30, and you have farmers by the market trying to sell the watermelon products. Jeff, I will come to you in a minute, because I know you, Greg, I know you'll be able to tell us a lot more about some of those. I want to go over to Anthony. Anthony, I'm going to come to you. And when I come to you, I'm going to take a call first. But when I come to you, I want to talk about water and some of those areas there.
Good night.
Good night, DJ Sean. And good night, Mr. G and the entire panel. Good night.
How are you doing?
Good night.
I'm good.
Okay.
Mr. G, I had two of your panelists talking about laws. But how can you have laws when those that took the oath to uphold our laws and our constitution are not upholding it. So it doesn't matter what law you bring, you need a mind change. As one of your previous scholars said, and I endorse what he said 100%. We have to change the way we think. We cannot have people that want to lead us. And the oath is to uphold our laws and our constitution, and they are the ones that violating it. That cannot work. No matter what law you bring, it wouldn't make a difference. We need people that are committed and will uphold the laws and the constitution of Dominica. That's the first thing. The second thing, as Jeff said, is agriculture. We got to use what we have before we look for something else. What are our strengths and our weakness? Our strength is agriculture, right? So you cannot have people that are dedicated farmers and a disaster would pass or something would happen and they have to give out grants or assistance, and you're going to choose who you're going to give assistance depends on what political side or what church or what ideology. I mean, we need a mind change. We need a mind shift. And I think he said, and he's absolutely right. The way we think, and we got to change the way we think before anything serious happens. We cannot see people being persecuted and victimized and harassed. And we just stand aside. We don't need this type of behaviors. We cannot tolerate this. So we need to set example. We need to hold people accountable for their actions. The laws have to be equally among the citizens. Nobody's above the law. So I don't know where we're gonna go, but unless we don't change the way we think and to realize what kind of Dominica we want to live under, Mr. G, I'm sorry to say bad news. We ain't going nowhere. Thank you.
But I think that is what the program is all about tonight, right? A reset, pressing that reset button and looking at ourselves, from inside after 44 years of independence. Say, look, maybe we need to make a fresh start. And we're taking the holistic approach to it. We're talking about laws, yes, and I'm glad that Greg raised the matter of laws, because laws are key. That's what governs our life. We live in a society. But I still want to go to the big things, because you see, Anthony, there are many things that have been done in Dominica. Many, many years ago, there was a plant making orange juice, canned orange juice. Talking about years ago, maybe 50, 60 years ago and more. We don't have it now. Why not? And there's so many other beverages that we can make. Water, you worked in the water business. I'm pretty sure you were part of, we started selling bulk water to cruise vessels. If we're not doing that anymore, why not? We have water just flowing into the sea. We listened to Jeff a while ago talking about what you can do with all this sewage water waste and so on. But Anthony, in terms of, we did have a small plant bottling water. I don't think we have that anymore. But yes, we have an abundance of, and you can tell us about the quality of the water in terms of where we stand in the globe in comparison to water all around the world. I think we have extremely good quality water. Your thoughts, Anthony? Let's tell us how we can really build on this. We have to make a fresh start now and get going with this. We can't continue importing water from Antigua that has no water.
So, Mr. G, you're quite right. Our acres of diamonds, so to speak, is the amount of water that we're standing in. And it's water that's being replenished every day, every week. It rains so much in Dominica. And so the question is, why haven't we been able to harness that resource? It is not debatable anymore that water is the next oil. Water is going to be as valuable as oil. And Dominica has an abundance of fresh water, which is very uncommon. Why have we not been able? And because we have not applied our minds to overcoming the simplest of obstacles. So Dominica is located in the center of the chain of a number of thirsty islands. You take Antigua, you take St. Martin, you take Anguilla, you take so many of these islands, and they're arid, they're dry. And not only do they need water for their population, they depend on tourism, and they need water for that added amount of their population. Dominica stumbled on supplying bulk water because countries say we don't want to depend on our water coming by a ship. Build storage facilities in those islands. Put the water in those islands, and as they use the water, you charge them for it. When I went to Anguilla in I think it was 94, General Electric had a desalination plant in Anguilla. They operated the plant, and they built some storage tanks, and they desalinated the water, put it in a tank, and as the local utility used, they put a meter on the tank, and as the local utility used water, the meter run, and they pay the bill at the end of the month. Very, very simple solutions that we allow ourselves to stumble on. During the Freedom Party, there was an attempt to do a bulk water facility. I don't know if you remember, they built this plant for the overspill from the hydro plant to take water and to sell bulk water in Newtown. Again, after that project was built, somebody asked, well, do you know that the Domlec intake pipes are wooden pipes, and they put creosote on those wood to preserve them? So is that creosote contaminating the water that's coming out on the other end? And that stumped an entire project after the project was built. I mean, what does it take to take a sample of that water, send it to a lab, analyze it, see what are the contaminants in there, what does it cost to treat it, and then keep on going and sell your water? So again, it just shows a lack of thought from the very inception, because basic engineering, if you're going to do a water facility, you take a sample of your source and you analyze it. That's even that is the first thing you do. You analyze it, you see what's in the water, and that will inform you as to how you're going to treat that water so that you can sell it. Now, when I was at Dawasco, we did a very interesting project where that huge line that was coming on from Padu into Newtown, it passed in close proximity to the water line from Springfield. And so we were able to make a connection. We shut the valve at Padu so none of that water would come in. And we made a connection between the existing water system and that pipe. And we essentially used that pipe as a storage tank. We ran a line from Newtown in front of Fort Young to the bayfront where the cruise ship come. And so we could sell water to the cruise ships without interfering with the supply of water to the city of Roseau. Because prior to that, when there's a ship in town, there used to be a lot of water issues, water pressure issues. And simply like that, we solved that problem, and we were able to sell, by now I'm sure, millions of dollars worth of water to the ships. So engineering, I think, is a great answer. The knowledge industry that we're talking about it will provide the technology. Engineering is going to provide the application. But Mr. G, before I leave you, as I talk about engineering, Dominica needs institutions that can establish standards and can create normal ways of doing business. So, for example, we need a professional engineering society, a society of professional engineers. Okay, and those engineers can now say, if you want to come to Dominica to work as an engineer, you have to submit your credentials to us. We'll review your credentials and we'll say, okay, yeah, you seem to have the experience and certification to work in Dominica as an engineer. That same organization can also look around the world at sister organizations and take standards and create a set of standards for Dominica in the building industry, in manufacturing, in feed production, any one of the engineering fields. You can get the standards so that when someone submits a project, that project can be analyzed against a set of standards. So me as an investor, It's predictable. I know that if my project meets this set of criteria, I am going to get an approved project and my project will go forward. It doesn't matter whether I support the government or I don't support the government. It's predictable that I will get my project approved because, on its merit. And that's the infrastructure, those are the things that we need to inspire confidence in local investors, but also in foreign direct investment, because Dominica lags all the other islands in the percentage of GDP that is foreign direct investment. We below all the islands, Antigua, St. Lucia, Grenada, it's measured. And part of that, in large part, has to do with, well, if you have a water, we'll come back to water. Let's say a local outfit wants to raise money to do a water bottling plant. That water bottling plant needs an investment of $5 million. You approach an outfit on the international market and say, this is a business plan. We have water, it's abundant, it's good quality, very little processing, and we have markets all around. Business-wise, it makes sense. That person is going to invest $5 million. They want to know that if I am a scoundrel and I go back on my word and misappropriate their $5 million or whatever it is, they can come to the courts in Dominica and sue me and have a good chance of getting a good hearing, a just hearing, and the case will be judged on its merit. But if you have a judicial system that seems to go by the whim and fancy of whoever is in power, maybe a case never gets called. Maybe the case languishes for 3 years and 5 years and 10 years. How am I going to convince an investor to invest in me, even if he thinks that he has confidence in me? That contingency is just too much for that risk is just too much for him to want to bear that. So that is one of the reasons why we don't have a robust water bottling plant in Dominica. Because for one, the banking industry in Dominica is reluctant to fund local projects. And two, the replacement of that will be to get an injection and investment from overseas, but the environment that will welcome an investor and give him a certain level of comfort doesn't exist. And so even though we are drowning in water, even though it rains torrentially every week, even though it's a no-brainer that this is a water quality that is excellent, we struggle to get the investment. And what I would say is that, Mr. G, one of the reasons why we have so much high quality water is because we've declared our forest reserves. The entire interior of the country is forest reserves and national parks. And so therefore, when we look at the Wasco, it was very easy to go into the forest reserve and establish an extraction point for drinking water, because there's no human being, no human activity above there except for a few hunters once in a while. So the water comes down, no treatment. You do a little chlorine and it sits in the tank for a little bit for sediment to settle, and the water goes to the the population. But what do we see now? We see all sorts of projects taking place in the interior in Dominica, destroying that forest that we reserve. And we don't see proper EIAs that say, okay, if I build a hotel on this ridge, where do their sewer go? When they do their septic tank and they soak away, and then we get water, we get rain, and that percolates down, which river does it end up in? Which ravine does it end up in? What does it do to the quality of the water? When we cut so many trees in the water catchment area, and now we cannot get that water retention, and our rivers start to produce very little water, and we're struggling to supply water to our villages while Dominica is known as the water country, and why we get flooded every time it rains, because we don't take care of that. There are a number of studies that have been done. There is a national investment strategy and action plan that was done in 2010 that looks at the entire country and lays out action plans for attracting foreign investment. the poverty reduction and social programs that have been done for Dominica. There have been development plans that have been in Dominica for the development of Dominica that's full and comprehensive. We had nobody mentioning any of those reports. How are we going to reset? How are we going to restart if we don't have a comprehensive plan that looks at all of the advantages and all the risk of the country? So I say that is where we have to start. The reports already exist. We need to go to them and we need to look at them and see how we can implement them. If and we would get a good head start in that way.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. And Greg, you've heard, you're listening to all of this. You've heard some of the callers express some concerns about the laws and the legal and regulatory frameworks and all of that. We've heard for the environment that could be enabling if you want to attract foreign direct investment in some of the specific areas that we're talking about in agriculture, agribusiness, and so on. We've heard about water, we've heard about the knowledge industries, and that too requires some legal and regulatory frameworks, right, for copyrights and so on, and intellectual property. But we also heard the mention of goats and milk and cheese and water and stuff like that. Give us some of your experience and share with us. And we also heard about essential oils, not just bay oil and cannabis oils and so on, but so many patchouli, there's so many different kinds of oils, and coconut oil, which is a big thing. So share with us some of your experience and your recommendations for some of those ideas and suggestions going forward. You're muted.
Unmute.
Yeah.
About goats, the dairy aspect of goats and the importance of that is not only can you produce, since you have many goats and the island is conducive to raising goats, they can be raised on a small scale by individuals. And for instance, in Kenya, their smallholder dairymen are generally families with 5 or fewer cows. And that operation is, for the most part, run by the women of the household. It's a tradition. And the money from the sale of their milk goes directly to their cell phone. There's no cash. So that provides safety for the women who are actually raising families and milking cows and generating milk. Okay, so then what happens to the milk? The worst thing that you could do is just sell it off as fluid milk because it's here one day and it's gone the next. The best thing would be to invest in further processing. And when you invest in further processing, then you have products that are unique. They're goat derived. And that can be, and I go back to Kenya, that can be the start of smaller industries across the country. And then it gets the attention of the international community. Because one thing that happens in East Africa, in Central Africa, is a lot of that milk will be further processed into powdered milk. And then it goes onto the world market. So it's not just having individuals with a few animals, it's having individuals with a few animals who have a market where they can quickly get their product to be processed before it spoils. So that's sort of a basic dairy model. The other thing about goats is that the United States USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, has invested in a research station called the Small Ruminant Research Center. It's in West Virginia, and it focuses all of its efforts on sheep and goats. The one that I worked at in Nebraska were pigs and cows and sheep, some larger animals. So why do they invest in small ruminants? And it's because of the quality of the meat and what the consumers are demanding, and the fact that goats are very efficient. They produce more meat and milk per pound of feed or grazing than does a cow. They're efficient. So there's a good reason to invest in that research. And it's that companies want to know the best way to raise their animals and how to feed them. And like Jeff said, the world does not want to have antibiotics in its feed. And not only do people not want that, there's a really good reason why we should stop doing that really quickly. And so there's an opportunity. Again, the size of Dominica is such that you can do things on a scale where you do have some hurdles. You know, the hurricane situation is a big deal, understand. But that's always a big deal. You can't control that. So the size of Dominica and the conducive environment to raising goats is a great thing. What if also you take that industry and morph it into a place where companies will come to raise genetically modified goats to produce drugs in their milk? So there are many human drugs that are difficult to produce any other way than putting the gene to make it in an animal and harvesting its milk. And because goat milk has low allergenicity, it can be purified from that goat milk and made into a drug. So that's something that I think Dominica has a groundwork laid for. It is a good place to raise goats and animals, and it's isolated. And so if you have genetically modified animals, the chances that they're going to be able to escape are some other science fiction situation, but is minimal, And so would companies want to come there to conduct that research and make it into production? So that's the goat dairy, the goat meat, and the goat as drug producing animals. And at the same time, you talked about essential oils. And one thing I didn't realize was the coming from New Orleans, we used a lot of bay leaf. So I know exactly what bay leaf is and what it's for and what it can be used for. And it was brought there essentially by the Creole ethnicity that is still a big part of that city. So companies, and I even have a project where I was approached by a large company to look at botanicals and take them the next step of screening them for antibiotic activity. Well, if you have an island where you have plants that are native to that area, and those plants have a chemistry and they do something, that's the basis of it. Because you can't just pick a place and start growing plants that might have, without breeding those plants. That takes a long time. So you already have that infrastructure. Could Dominica become a place where companies come to do research and development on that whole topic of botanicals? Everybody here in the United States has dollar signs in mind when they talk about cannabis, but the real value of cannabis is in psychoactive drugs that are regulated by the U.S. government, but they still have to be produced. So I see that as another place where plant breeders can have, a great environment. Because the other thing I understand that Dominica has is you have heat. You have a terrific, moist, hot environment for growing plants and raising things year round, where you don't have seasonal problems, where you can have greenhouses that are powered by the environment, the climate. If the focus becomes on the strong points in the natural resources, like water, like certain botanicals, like animals that thrive there, and even maybe new industries like poultry, then you've narrowed down, I think, you begin to narrow down and focus on things that are achievable and are not just research topics that sound good. Those are what I would look for, where I am investing in R&D and ultimately manufacturing and production.
Yeah, well, Greg, I want to engage you a minute longer because I really want to talk a little bit more about the research, the R&D part of it. Because if you can see that Dominica needs a lot of research, because whatever we do, we have to think about meeting international quality standards. And we do have something called a Bureau of Standards, but I'm not so sure how organized it is or how well equipped it is to meet international standards, and whether it functions as sort of a buffer where you can examine all the things, come and look at all the products and see what the shelf life is and look at the labels and see the contents. So we're talking about eliminating antibiotics and those kind of things and so on. I'm not sure whether they're looking at all of that, and I'm not sure the laws require that they do that. But the point is, the fact of the matter is, we know that we need research. And one of the things that I think it was Jeff who may have mentioned that, or either Jeff or Anthony, we don't have a very good record recently of attracting foreign direct investment. So obviously, you might need foreign direct investment to look at these research facilities. So let's talk about that a little bit. How can Dominica position itself to be able to do this kind of research, because that research covers a whole range of agriculture and agribusiness and so on.
So Dr. St. John mentioned that you have you're a dean of a college, and you have administrative responsibilities, and you have department heads who answer to you. And if you look at a department, a discipline department like sociology or history or chemistry or whatever, what is the role of the department chair, the unit head? And I would contend that the leader of any research institution has basically the same mandate, and that is to facilitate scientists and technicians and professors' success. They're not there to do the science necessarily, and they're not there to be always the generator of terrific ideas. They're there to create that environment for the success of faculty and scientists and engineers. That should be how they're selected, that they have that ability to motivate people and to protect those people from forces like economic forces or political forces. Their job is to grow that seed. So if Dominica was a place where one of its industries was facilitating research of all types, and we've talked about very specific things, water and hydrology engineering, that resource, I didn't know that about the other islands surrounding Dominica in that part of the world. That's a huge thing. If those other specific areas we talked about are the resource, but now you need the environment for people to want to come and conduct research. So then your industry becomes the actual execution of doing research. You become a place where you have laws that are there to protect investments, laws that are there to protect, that are there to give help with environmental impacts, because you don't want to be a place where people come and do irresponsible research with plants, and the next thing you know, you have an invasive species infecting the whole island. You know, that's not a good day. So you need that in place. But you have an institution, which I understand to this day remains vacated, the Ross University Medical School. And if that was a place where people could come and set up shop and not have to buy property, but set up shop, and research projects, aren't quick. They need 4, 8, 10, 16 years in order to come to fruition. If people want to rent and lease space to conduct research, they have that institution waiting there to possibly be used. And at the same time, that's how you generate income for the public, right? Because these are things, I think, which are more or less public entities. They're property of the citizens of Dominica. So Dominica builds its reputation as becoming a place where people think of doing research in agriculture and whatever it is, antibiotic research, antibiotic alternative research, raising livestock of certain types, water technology and water science, if that's associated with Dominica, then now the industry isn't water, goats, chickens, plants. The industry is research.
Well, I remember the Clemson University, they had seen that opportunity, and they did set up shop in Dominica to do some research. I remember that distinctly. I'm not sure where that project is now, whether the university is still engaged with it, but I do know that there was something happening right there.
So universities have field stations too. And you reminded me of something that we talked about when we introduced each other on the phone. And it's about climate change research. I think right now the USDA ARS needs to invest a lot more money in plants and crops that don't require as much water, that can survive and produce in heat. And you have that natural environment already. And so there has to be research that focuses just upon the changes that are going to be a reality because of climate change.
Mm-hmm. No, that's excellent. That's excellent. So Peter, you can see where we're headed. You're looking at the holistic approach. You can see all these wonderful ideas. I mean, starting from the knowledge industries, and all of this is interconnected, because all of this requires the knowledge industries, as Bernard will tell you. But you are focused on making sure that we're okay, making sure that, our mindset is fine, that we can live each other in harmony and eliminate all this crime and so on. That peaceology thing, Peter, that you're doing, I'm not so sure that everyone understands, but I understand it and I really like it. I have to tell you, I've looked at it from the time you discussed it with me and I really loved it. I think this is a kind of investment that can make a serious impact on the society and on the economy, because it can create a much better environment in which for people to live. And ultimately, I mean, whatever we do, I mean, you want to build a house, you want to have land, you want to have recreation, but if your environment is bad, I mean, you hear so much talk about Chicago and New York subways and some of the crime rates. Nobody wants to live in an area where there's a lot of crime. So you want to go into a peaceful environment. And the nature island concept of Dominica, where if you have resilience from the natural exogenous shocks, and if you can have sustainability in the sense that you can use the natural resources, become self-sufficient, whether it's food and whatnot. It seems to me what you need in order to want to live or vacate extensively on that island is to have a good peaceful environment. I think peaceology is trying to provide the answer to that by making peace a profitable thing.
Yes, and if we were to go from what Greg said, I made a comment in the chat here, and I said that it's nice to have people with fresh eyes, because when we see the same thing, it is not interesting to us. But Greg has me thinking there for this moment about this issue of scale, and to rethink some of that. And Mr. G, remember in 2019, the election was the last election, right? Is that right?
2019, yeah.
Right. And I was in Dominica during the time because I came in a few weeks before, and I went through what happened in Marigot, what happened in Salisbury, and I was writing a book on whose victory, Dominica, and I actually wrote a piece on whose victory, but I decided not to write, at least yet, the book because of the angle I didn't want to go down. But what I was fascinated by is that Dominica was, at its time, on the 3rd of November of 2019, one of the most vulnerable spots that we saw Dominica in modern day history. When Marigot was being burnt, the street there in West Flat fire was happening just before the eve of the election, and all kinds of things were bound. And I was on this ground zero spot where young men were making Molotov cocktails and so on. And I was there with before we had the face mask because it wasn't COVID yet. And I witnessed, and I went up to Salisbury afterwards with the blood on the scene and the shooting. I'm a soldier. I'm a classified level operator from the United States U.S. Army. I've said that. I'm a veteran of the United States Army. And I experienced a very life-changing moment when I was driving my wife and my 2 young daughters to the airport to leave, and they were going to leave me on the island. And we got caught up in Marigot with the fire going on and the street blockage going on. And I had to literally get out of my vehicle, get in military mode, and clear off with my children videotaping and crying in the process. And some people who knew me allowed me to get my family to the airport safely. And then I came back and spent the time. In fact, when my wife and children left, I got on my knees while the plane was going and I cried that my family had safely left. Ophelia Olivachi Marie was at the airport. She didn't have, she couldn't bring her other bag. She came with the little that she had, you know, and things like that. It was a very, very tense environment that I have some of the stuff I'm still contending with. And at this moment, I saw Dominica at its best to some extent when it comes to this issue of peacefulness. Because, Mr. G, you have no idea how bad Salisbury and Marigot could have been. Ask Mr. Claude Wicks, he'll tell you. Ask some of the soldiers on the ground. They will tell you how close things could have gotten so bad. But there is something about the Dominica spirit. There is something about the small yards that we grew up in. Apre bon Dieu, c'est la terre. Pa kite yo Port Dominique hod nou. There is something about what we hear on National Day. There's something about what our grandmothers and our grandfathers and our relatives tells us. There's something about, in spite of the fact that you may not like Roosevelt Skerritt or you may not like Lennox Linton, you will not go so far to cause harm to them. And you will respect Mr. Skerritt's family and you will respect Mr. Linton's family. And in spite of the fact that you do not like those people, you will not do those things to them because that is not Dominican. There is something special about the water that we drink, the song that we listen to, the people that we fight and quarrel with, that we have to make up with soon thereafter. There is something about this island that we were one of the last that the colonials could conquer, and that the Negmao and those of us who went up in the hill and places like Grand Bay that had 40 years before they had roads, and the different types of culture we developed from the north and the south. There is something about this land that is the most peaceful land on earth that we have not yet found out. And I saw the key of that during the 3rd of November, during the 3rd and the 6th there, during one of the most violent potentials in Dominica. I, as a person that is not unfamiliar with war and war zones, saw the potentials of peace. And I decided to invest in make a multi-million-dollar investment within a year thereafter, because I was reunited to the fact that Dominica is the most peaceful potential place on the earth, and that is where I was going to invest, not just my money, but my thought. And this is where I'm going to bring the world to the headquarters to understand Jinping music, as what I'm calling the peace music. This Jinping music and this Bunyo music and this Karas music, this stuff is not joke. I mean, this stuff is real building human beings. The greatness that you see in Ito, the greatness that you see in Bellot, the greatness that you see in Drigo, Mr. J, the greatness that you see in you is what Greg sees when he talks about the scale of Dominicans. When Dominicans, we make jokes about so many things that other countries wish they had, because in spite of the fact that we talk all of this violence on radio, how much of that political violence that you see in Dominica? I mean, think about it. Why isn't there even more violence in Dominica? It's not because the police is going to stop us, because, hey, it's not because people trust the leader. Some people do, some people don't. It's not because we have big guns and we have big armies. Maybe it's a little bit of all of this, but it's also the fact that as Dominicans, there are ways, there's a culture of peace. We say la paix. Yes, it's peace. Let moun fâché ever. Let moun de fâché ever. When somebody's not talking to you and they vex with you, we say, oh, Dominicans don't like to deal with issues. They just want to let it go and say, guys, so don't worry about that. They let them. There is something about how we grew up, how we eat, how we drink. When the colonials came here, they said that they could not kill us in the mountains as the Maroons. They could not kill us in the mountain because the colonials said that it is something in the yams that we ate that allowed us to be able to prosper. The waters that we drink. In Pisology Acres, we have like mini maroon camps that you can see why the terrain of Dominica has made us so blessed, why we could resist for so long. The point that I'm making, Mr. G, they say crime pays, but peace pays more. We say that water is the next oil. Dominica has that water, they flow. You go to Trafalgar and water bar. And I stopped counting because I was calculating millions of gallons that keep flowing right there. And when a conflict happened in Dominica, we have too many murders by our own standards. But if you see a fight happening in Dominica, people may stand for a while, but after a while, somebody's going to walk up and say, "Gasa Professor." Somebody is going to join in. So what I am saying is this: let us think of one of the most important things that people want in this world is the ability to realize the best of their humanity. And they cannot do that in an environment where they're not physically, psychologically, emotionally, culturally safe. Dominica, from my international experience, has one of, in fact, I would say the best foundation for a prosperous and sustainable platform of peacefulness. Dominica is the most peaceful place in the world. Our statistics just hasn't shown it yet. And on Pisology Acres, Mr. G, if you're in Dominica over Christmas time, I would like to invite you to a tree lighting ceremony to work with Gloria Walsh and the other young people that are working with us, because we started almost 10 years now teaching peace intelligence and peaceology intelligence to those young people, and we're seeing this bear fruit. I'm spending less time running after talking about the violence and those issues because I see those potentials. And as a scientist, part of what we do is be able to make predictions of what's to happen. And when we see those predictions, we make less effort on trying to convince people about what we're saying because they don't see what we see. We just have to put the work into action. So, Mr. G, what I'm saying in summary here is that we have the best product to offer the world. We have a gift to offer the world. That is the very nature of being a Dominican person is a person who cares about yourself, care about the environment, cares about your country, and strive to do better. And in an isolated environment around nature and around other people that primarily want that for themselves, except for a few distractions.
Well, and that sort of characteristic shows because wherever Dominicans are, whether they're in Dominica or outside of Dominica, people notice that, right? And you know, Dominicans have a way of getting along with everybody. I mean, I know so many people tell me that Dominicans are nice people. Right here in Canada, I meet people all the time and they tell me, oh, I know somebody from this is a nice person. That's the word they use. It's a nice person.
It's a multi-trillion-dollar product, and I want to awaken us about this because these young people that you see going out there that still saying good morning, forget about those that Malka say, but the ones that still telling you good morning and good afternoon, the fathers that are still taking care of their families, the mothers that are still taking care of their families, the people that have the hurt but find ways to forgive and believe in God or believe in something else. That is the future of our place. That is the core of all of what we are talking about. This is what's going to be the mustard seed to build the greatness of everything that we have expressed here.
Thank you for that, Peter. You know, we've gone around the table there. We've talked, so many very, very, I mean, very nice issues have come up here tonight. The critical issues. I mean, we really did a good talk here tonight and examined what is going on, and we can see we really need to have a paradigm shift. And certainly, I think the only problem is that if we don't try to go to bed soon, those of us who are over 40 need another kind of shift. So I want to just, because our time has sort of run out here, but I must say I want to thank everybody. But let's take a round of closing comments from everybody. because I mean, I was so happy with the discussion here tonight. I'm sure our listeners or, and our people on Facebook and YouTube and so on, certainly they enjoyed all of this. I learned quite a bit myself. But Bernard, I want to start up with you and let's make our closing remarks.
Certainly, and as you said, I'll echo your comments, Mr. G, that very interesting panel discussion, very useful. It's the beginning of the conversation for the paradigm shifts, because paradigm shifts starts with new ideas being articulated and incorporated into a worldview, into our mental models. At the end of the day, the mental models that we carry around in our head determines our reality. There's no escaping it. And so, but that happens for conversation. That happens through people expressing new ideas and others accepting those new ideas and new values that come out of accepting those new ideas. And then that's how you get that paradigm shift that we're talking about. So these conversations that we have are very important. They help to change the dynamics of how what we believe, how we see the world, and what we value about the world. And so they're very, very important. And I fully support all the ideas that were expressed here tonight in terms of the water industry, in terms of the botanicals, in terms of the piss industry, in terms of the agricultural processing industries, and all of those things are very important. But I will say in my closing remarks that we should definitely do those things. But I think we have to identify a central core of what we do that appreciates that we're a vulnerable island that is susceptible to massive environmental disruption. Therefore, we need to build an industry that is robust and resilient to that. And I would say, therefore, we should focus on, as the core, again, I say we should do all these things that we discussed, but at the core, we should build an industry that is built between our ears rather than built on the ground, that is much more resilient to recover from a disaster from. We should also focus on the realities that all the ideas that we express has to be captured, analyzed, processed, done. And so the small agricultural industries and all the ideas that we express, we could do this for the world, right? We could do the processing and the understanding and conceptualizing and the analysis for the world. We do not need to restrict ourselves to our 365, our 290 square miles, whatever it is now, island. We have to think globally. We have to think that we want to create industries where the market is the world. And so a lot of the things we talked about, exports and so on, is great, but I think it's much easier to export and transport. We're a small island in the middle of the ocean. You can transport bits at the speed of light, but atoms takes weeks on boats. So we must think about the realities about what we're on and try to create a central core. And I think that central core has to be built around the digital economy that enables those things that I speak about. If you can create 5,000 jobs in the digital economy, 1,000 in cloud computing, 1,000 in cybersecurity, 1,000 in simulations, 1,000 in analytics, data science, and all of those things, if we can create 5,000 jobs in these areas, and those are six-figure income jobs, but let's say we cut that in half, and we say we'll pay half the salaries you would earn in the United States, so 50,000 US dollars. If we can create those 5,000 jobs at 50,000 US dollars over the next 10 years, we would have almost doubled our GDP. We would create about $250 million, which is our GDP is right now about $500 million. We could create $250 million in new value if we could train young people within the next 10 years to take those jobs, which are now in high demand. And this is the moment to get in on the ground floor. We have to have a focused strategy that says we're going for these jobs, go off and get them, train the people in the next 5 to 10 years to do it, and transform our economy. Because once you do that, with that economic core, that all the things we talked about, the water exports, the pharmacology, the targeted farming, the smart farming, the small husbandry industries, the service industries, the manufacturing, the construction, all of those things, due to the multiplier effect, will be driven explosively by that economic engine. And so from an economic standpoint, we should focus a very targeted strategy on the jobs of the future, grab them and build out all those things, because Jeff will become a millionaire by doing his chicken farming thing if we have 5,000 people earning 50,000 US dollars job, buying chicken, buying local produce, buying fruits, bottling water, one fresh water, and all of those things marketed to the world. So that's my vision of this, and it's not to discount anything that we've said. I agree totally; those things are necessary. But if we have to take 50 million US dollars from our sale of parcels, I would say develop research institutions around those industries, train our people, send them overseas, do internships around those industries because it will enable everyone else, businesses, accountants, whoever else. It is the right strategy for us because we are building, as I said, between our brains, not on the ground. After a major hurricane, it takes us 2 weeks to get back in operation. We just need restore internet connection. Our servers are overseas in Denmark. Our knowledge is in our head. We plug back in. We're up and running. That's the reality that we have to deal with climate change becoming a big problem and the opportunities that this, and I say that not because this is my area of expertise. I say that because that is the position of many who development economists, which I also have qualification in, that pursuing this sort of leapfrog strategies is what is necessary to small vulnerable nations. We have to leapfrog certain stages of development right into the forefront of the thing, and we can because all it takes is educated people who are trained in the right areas to grab those opportunities and to drive the Pisology project. And I love that, but absolutely it will be enabled, and peace will thrive when you have young, satisfied men and women who are living the sort of lives that they can envision staying in Dominica to live and prosper and live lives comparable to what they see others living elsewhere.
Well,
And
yes.
that is the focus of our strategy and vision.
And of course, you know that Bernard embodies that because Bernard is in Dominica, but he works. He's been working out of Dominica. And he mentioned a few figures. I don't want to associate his name with any figures, but he mentioned a few figures. I suspect he may have been talking about himself, but who knows? But who knows? He may not have been. He may have been talking about Jeff, but he misspoke a little bit when he said that Jeff would become a millionaire. I think what he meant was you left out
Multi.
the multi part of it.
Ah, yes.
That is the
Yes.
part thing that you left
Well,
out.
we shall all, because Peter himself should also, we should all aspire to be multimillionaires. The more they are in Dominica, the greater the ship, the tide lifts all ship. In fact, that should be the next national strategy: create a thousand millionaires, multimillionaires on
Or
island.
more than 1,000. I mean, if we had 50, 60,000 millionaires in Dominica, that would be ideal. Then Peter
Hey,
wouldn't
we
be
could
in
become
trouble.
the greatest GDP per capita nation in the world, and why not?
Now, Jeff, you yourself, Bernard mentioned data. Data rules the world because, Jeff, you yourself, you lamented that how could the minister talk about this level of import? I mean, he's been minister, what, for maybe 20 years? And that is the level of imports that you have. He's not been able to substitute some of that. I mean, you mentioned data, and you said everything should be based on data. You illustrated that very well with the poultry industry. In your closing remarks, Jeff, just let's wind up with some of the things that you really want to leave us with, the thoughts you want to leave us and our listeners with here tonight.
Well, thanks again to all our listeners. Thanks for those of you who sent the many WhatsApp messages and said that they're glad that people were listening and was taking notes. The crossroad we are right now, think about 6 years from now, God's willing, we're going to be turning 50 as an independent nation. What are we going to be doing in the next 6 years, God's grace, when we turn 50 as an independent nation to make us be independent, truly independent? And when I look at numbers like almost $200 million importing food, that's not gonna cut it. What can we do to cut that into half? Um, I want to leave something very good for young people today. I want to tell our young people in Dominica that we can do better. We have to believe in ourselves, and all of us were not born to have a PhD, MBA, and so on. What are the things we have in Dominica we look into to develop ourselves, to create self-employment and eventually create jobs for the people? I think livestock is a great way. Poultry industry is very good. Think about broilers. You can get paid every 6 weeks. I mean, Greg can tell you, like from a chick, a 1 day old chick, you purchase a 1 day old chick till you can sell that bird into Dominican market for £5, it's within 6 to 8 weeks. You can be a millionaire raising birds and take it seriously. These are the simple things we can do. And as Ito said, the ideas are great, but we have to find a way to put it into reality because this is where the world is, and we have to do this. I also want to say to our young people that if people like Peter Seja and myself can leave Dominica without even passing the common entrance exam, and we're not ashamed to say to the world, and we come elsewhere and we find opportunities to do it, guess what? You can do it too. All it takes is hard work, discipline, and listen. And people like Dr. Siragusa can tell you, one of the things that I really appreciate getting to know people like Dr. Siragusa, your humbleness. This guy sitting on this program is a very, very educated guy, very humble guy, have a ton of experience in research and development. And though the tables were sound around, whose boss was who, but the opportunity with working people like Siragusa taught me a lesson in that how to be humble and how to take life seriously as a young person. And if you believe in doing something for the right reason, you will succeed. So, Dominicans, in the next 6 years, I hope when we celebrate 50 years of independence, we will turn that $200 million of importation of food into $200 million worth of food export from Dominica to the rest of the world. Can this happen? It can happen if we believe it. So happy independence to all. Thanks for listening. Thanks for having us, Mr. G. And God bless Dominica.
Happy to do that. Anthony, I know you too would like to see many, many, many millionaires in Dominica. We have the natural resources. We need to add value to them. I think one of the areas we can certainly do that is with our water. I mean, let's face it, Dominica has not capitalized on the fact that our Mount Papito National Park has been designated by the UNESCO as a World Heritage Site. We have not monetized that in any way. So we're reserving all the forest areas, all the catchment areas, and the world is saying if you reduce your carbon footprint, we're going to pay you for doing that. You can earn money just by doing that. We're doing this, but we're not capitalizing on it. In your closing remarks, Anthony, let's talk a little bit about that if you can.
So, Mr. G, in closing, what I'd like to say is that we need to pause, think, and take stock of where we are. We have a history of generating hydroelectricity in Dominica. That technology has advanced so far where you have micro hydro plants that you can put in any one of our streams and generate electricity, whether to run your farm or to run your home, and all of those type of things. So at the end of the day, the message that I want to leave is that we have to stop and think. We have to stop and think and take stock and really look at what are the risks and how can we solve them, what are the opportunities and how we can take advantage of them. And we're standing on an island that has gold in terms of our water. We have very little processing to do. A little disinfection, a little bit of filtration to remove any sediments, and we have water that can win any contest in any part of the world. And so we're just standing there, and we're surrounded by a market of thirsty island. And so we really, really need to think about where we want to go. And as I said before in my last time around, there exist studies, a lot of studies that has been done that have examined Dominica, examined all of those things that we say, and put together a comprehensive plan. Maybe they need to be upgraded. Maybe they need to get a little dusting up, because with COVID and with a lot of the new technology, some of those reports are as old as 2006. So there may be some adjustments that we need to make, but we can start there. Mr. G, we need to encourage folks to go on the Government of Dominica website. On the Government of Dominica website, you will find those reports. And they're sitting there, they're just not being implemented. And so There are comprehensive plans. Dominica has spent a lot of money employing consultants to develop those studies and to do those reports. We need to have the will to implement them. What I want to say also is that we have to take assessment of our reality, and we know the challenges that exist based on the people who are in power. And so we as citizens have to find solutions. And one of the solutions I would suggest is for professional societies. If you have professional and organized societies, we can look at there's a company that's doing X work and it's substandard. We as professionals can call them out and say, this is not how you do a road. This is not how you do drainage. This is not how you do construction. And we can start there. In all of those industries, we can start there. As citizens, we can come together and form professional organizations and let us establish what we expect as a standard and what we expect in terms of licensing. So I'm going to stop there, and I want to wish all Dominicans again very safe. We have Dr. Saint-Jean on board, so very peaceful celebration of our independence, and let's aspire. Let's not limit our mind. Let's aspire to have the best life that we can have, because we do occupy the best spot on the planet. So happy independence, everybody.
Thanks a lot, Anthony. But Greg, you really caught my attention here tonight. You caught my attention because some of the things that you were presenting, some of the solutions, some of the ideas, they're so easy to understand the way you explain them. Any ordinary person, you don't have to be a technical person, you have to be a university graduate. If I understood it, anybody else will. So the fact of the matter is, when you talk about goats and you talk about milk and you talk about all those various industries there that we can do with what we haven't even talked about the potential for geothermal and the kind of electricity that can be generated from that, and that electricity that can be used to generate other things, because our electricity unit cost may be high because the size of plant that we may be able to put. But the point, if we can't export it, but the point is, we might be able to use that extra electricity to generate other things that maybe spacecrafts can use. I mean, you're the scientist, you tell me. But the point is that I was very, I was very impressed with the simple way that you're approaching the solutions, and they're talking things about that our farmers have been doing. All we have to do is to listen to Jeff, listen to Bernard, and talk about let data guide us in our planning and in what we do and how we set our goals. And you see Anthony say, listen, we make plans, we never use them. We put them on shelf taking dust. Let's go back and revisit them and update them. But planning must be the center, must be at the core. Because we cannot go and market or produce or whatever without a plan. So Greg, I was very happy to hear from you. So in your closing remarks, you can just, wind up with some of those suggestions for us. So very happy to hear your closing remarks on this.
Thank you, Mr. G. And I asked myself, how would you in 5 years judge whether or not some of the efforts that you started or will start were successful? And I guess one obvious way is, well, how did they change the economy? How much money did they bring into the economy? That's one way. But there's another way, and that is that the intrinsic value of a research environment, I think, is similar to a school or a college or a university. When people in other countries start calling up Dominica and saying, we want you to teach us what you did, then you'll know that it's doing something that is right and of value. And when those other countries call you and say, we want you to send your people to our country to do what you did, then you'll know that you've attained success. A comment I would like to make too is that the knowledge of farmers and food producers right now is so vast. It's virtually untapped, but there's a lot that farmers don't know. And in one of my excursions in rural Kenya, we came across a young mother who had, I think, 3 or 4 children, but she had 3 cows and was a very good milk producer. And she was introduced to us as being one of the best milk producers in the area. And one of our groups said, "Well, have you ever thought about making yogurt?" Because in Kenya, there's a growing middle class of people who want dairy products that are fermented, like yogurt. And she said, "No." And the reason is because she said, "I don't know how." It wasn't that she wouldn't do it. So I think investment in the extension of education, investments in outreach education is equally as important. So I would like to finish by addressing the future of all of our situations, and that is our children and the children of Dominica. And I would like to say that the world is flat. In the words of Thomas Friedman, the author, the world is flat. And that means that you have the same opportunity as anybody else to take knowledge and to gain knowledge and to follow what you think, what your dreams are, to do what you think is right or what you dream of doing. So to all the young people out there, I would say, take the opportunity to write to anybody on this panel that you were interested in. And if you liked what they said, take the time to write and email Mr. G, and I'm sure he'll share, if everybody is okay, he'll share emails and write us. I would love to hear from you. I want to hear what you say, because the future is yours. And that's the truth. The future of your country is in your hands. And thank you very much for the chance to speak, and I hope we get to do it again.
We certainly look forward to doing it again with you, Greg. I mean, one of the things that you just mentioned, before I go over to Peter, because he has the last word here tonight, one of the things I wanted to mention, and every member of the panel here would know that, Dominica at one time, and you're right, in terms of the intrinsic values, because Dominica at one time was sort of known throughout the region as a leader in primary health care. Yes, I mean, that is something that we're very proud of. I'm not sure what happened to that now, but Dominica was one of the leaders in primary healthcare in the region. And in fact, we have a doctor called Dr. Clarissa Etienne. We lost her, of course. She went to PAHO. She became the head of PAHO. I think she may be retiring now from PAHO. So maybe she might come back to us and do something else again in our health system. But I mean, certainly we were the envy of the region. So I agree with you. When you talk research and you talk about farmers and the knowledge that farmers have, and the fact of the matter is, I think success really can be measured beyond the monetary value, and we look at the intrinsic value. Because if people start saying, well, listen, I want to hear from Dominic about the research in this and that and that, I think that is where the value comes in. So I particularly like the research, and I would like to talk to you a little bit more about that, the research and development, because I think that is where, and Jeff will agree with me. I mean, you have to get the research on, and I think Bernard will agree as well, because all these industries that we are talking about are going to require research. Peter does a lot of research. Anthony agrees with Richard. He talk about all these project proposals and the documents and the plans that are there. There's research that has gone there. So the value of that research, I think, is we must not lose the notion of the value of that research. So we'll need to talk about that a little bit more. Peter, you have the last word.
Mr. G, thank you. And maybe that's sharing too much information, but you and I engage in lengthy conversations, right? Thank you for joining me on my ride from home to somewhere. Mr. G, thank you for respecting what I told you, that I do not want to do shows about just talking anymore. I told you I want to do shows about action because I've entered a new phase in my career where I've seen enough, and I just want to help us to get results. So I want to propose a challenge tonight, or an opportunity tonight, that, inspired by what all of you have said, I would like to dedicate some land on Pisology acres for a future industry success incubator. I came up with this word from, the first thing in my mind was new industry, but not all of the industries are new. But from what Greg has spoken about success, for what Bernard has spoken about thinking and about the industry, for what I've heard from Drigo about engineering and the water and the hydro, and from my friend Jeff, what we have always spoken about how we can move away from those types of contaminants ways of living. I would like you to write the dates of Thursday, December 22nd. I know it's close to Christmas, from 7 to 9 p.m. and Thursday, the 5th of January of 2023, from 7 to 9 p.m. We are going to convene a meeting at the Z building at Pisology Acres, where we will begin to discuss this. I don't have enough life left to play around with serious, important things like that. And I extend an invitation for each of you, even if I haven't got a fancy bed, we haven't got beds in the building yet, but we can figure that out. But we have the building. Gentlemen, we have resources. This is our time. It is time for us to talk, to put action to our words. So I will be in Dominica, God willing, during that period of time, and I will start putting the things in motion, even if I'm the only one there. And Bernard, you what Dominic, Bernard, what Dominic, right? So see what Dominic, what Dominic Vinny. I'm inviting
Merla.
Sabo. So what about you? What about you, Drigo? You Dominica too?
I'm in Brooklyn. But Dominica is just up in right away.
You can take a first class flight. Jeff can pay that for you. But Mr. G, if you're in town, seriously, Greg, I'm inviting you. I'm inviting you. Stay on Pisology Acres with me. Seriously, brothers. So I'm inviting us to begin to continue these ideas. And I'm willing, because I've been thinking about a research incubator on this beautiful land that overlooks the waterfalls. And I have this vision of a nice glass building that is panoramic glass building, and that we can enjoy, and we have the state-of-the-art building where research and development can be done, and we can get good donors with deep pockets to basically put their names on rooms and sponsor places where people like us in different parts of the world can go to Nature Isle and spend a month or 2 or 3 or whatever we want in a state-of-the-art building to develop modules that are intended to advance the success of various industries. And I am proposing we call it the Industry Success Incubator. The name could change. Guys, I'm that type of guy. When I get involved in something, I like to try to move. So, Mr. G, whatever it is, I think I have enough authority to say that it's a go, because I will talk to myself and see if I approve it, and I just said yes. So... All right. So that's the word. I don't have much more to say. I've said all I've said. We have 2 meetings in action. And guys, let's go to work. Those of you who are listening, you know how to reach me, you know how to Mr. G. Mr. G will talk more about that. But we have put the action in the work. If we are serious about this, we have a place already that we can begin. Let's make it happen.
Well, I hear you. And I know that a lot of the young people out there, they heard you. Because this is exactly what their language is. There's a lot of talk, but we need the action. I think there are a lot of the young people in Dominica, guys, very bright, very skilled. They're looking for some action. I mean, they don't. Everybody does not need to go to university and spend many years doing a PhD. Not everybody has to do that. The fact of the matter is, a lot of these young people are raring to go. They're enthusiastic. They have the energy, and they want to use it to do something productive and give their life some positive meaning. A lot of these young people, they just want to self-actualize. They have some extraordinary things that they would like to do, and they want an opportunity. I think they heard you, and I'm pretty sure that we will probably get some communication from some people making some inquiries. They want to talk some more. They want to learn some more. They want to get some. And Greg, I'm happy that you put this out, because go right ahead.
Mr. G, I want to thank in advance the Dominica Association in Tampa, Florida. That is one of the sponsors for our tree lighting ceremony we're going to have at Pisology Acres for the young people we've been working with, in connection with Gloria Walsh and Love One Teach One Foundation, and the others that will help us, because we're trying to get some drums, some steel band, and some other musical instrument to teach our young people to play the local music and so on. So there'll be activities going on in Peaceology Acres from about the 20th of December into some parts of January. And that's why I know for sure that if God willing, we have that space for this to happen, so we can continue to put this thing into action.
Well, if you have 17 acres, you have some space there, I think, right?
You have space, yeah.
All right, so gentlemen, I really want to thank every one of you. I really appreciate it and the contributions that you made here tonight. I know that our listeners were delighted to hear all of that. It was really very refreshing to hear some really positive ideas, and there's so much of a mix. And I think I think maybe it was, I'm not even sure who said that, but they said, there's so much, we're going to have to select certain things and start with those, right? And I certainly believe, yes, we do have to, maybe it was Bernard who said that, right? So we're going to have to select some things and go with them. And Greg has given us a good way forward, you know. I mean, when he talks about goats, I mean, many Dominican farmers would know about that. I mean, but then when he talks about what you can do with them and what they make, you can create and process and make cheese and all those things right from Dominica, then the farmers start thinking, what did they know? Somebody to help them to organize and plan, get the data and get going and put the environment in place, the enabling environment, policy and regulatory and otherwise, that can help them to succeed. So I think we're onto something. I think I'm happy that we had this conversation now at the 44th anniversary of independence. Or maybe we can do that when the 45th anniversary of independence and come back and evaluate to see, did we accomplish anything did anything come out of this? You know, maybe after we attend this function by Peter, then we'll see, maybe we'll have time to brainstorm there if any of us can make it. So, gentlemen, thank you so much. And I hope we can do this again another time. Anthony, it was really a delight having you tonight. Jeff and Greg and Peter, thank you so much for being here tonight.
And I said there are no beds yet, but there'll be beds by the time you arrive, guys. So don't be frightened. Okay.
Well, it's all right. You can put the blow up
We're
beds
Dominicans, we adjust.
That's okay. We'll rough it up.
Big pie cocoa bed and Peter. Pie cocoa.
C'est ça même, c'est ça même.
Good night, gentlemen.
Thanks, everybody.
I want to thank DJ Shan and Sherwin as well for being with us and making it possible for us to have this broadcast tonight. Thanks a lot to our listeners, our viewers, Facebook and YouTube, and all around the globe and in every nook and cranny in the communities in Dominica. Thank you so much. Gentlemen, have a good night.
Good night, Mr. G.
Bye-bye. Good night, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Good night, everybody.
All right, Greg. Very nice meeting you, Greg.
Good to meet you. Thank you.
All right.
All right. Good night.